Elon Musk, Innovator, Entrepreneur, and Visionary, by Chris McNabb, narrated by Jeff Sugiyama. Introduction. In 2021, Time magazine crowned Elon Musk its Person of the Year. The magazine's editors and leaders were not naive in their decision. They knew it would attract opinionated feedback from corners of press and public, both approbation and disapproval. But the article was vigorous in its defense of the choice. It acknowledged that Musk's personality could be a difficult meal for some to digest, but against that had to be set the world-beating scale of his achievements, many of which are literally reshaping the technological future of the human race, on and off this planet. Musk is easily cast as a hubristic supervillain, lumped in with tech bros and space playboys for whom money is scorekeeping and rockets are the ultimate toy. But he's different. He's a manufacturing magnate, moving metal, not bytes. To prove its point, Time listed just some of his astonishing adventures in entrepreneurship and engineering. His innovations and companies have remolded modern humanity's narratives on online banking and financial transactions, space exploration, the possibilities of multiplanetary human societies, clean energy, electric vehicles, solar power, energy storage, traffic management, tunneling, artificial intelligence, transport, and much more. At the same time, his face and persona have become as familiar in popular culture as that of any A-list film star. His every life move, personal and professional, is dissected, debated, and interpreted in the media, producing not only, at its best, well-balanced analysis and insight, but also some harsh judgments and critical feeding frenzies on social media. He is also, at the time of writing, the world's richest individual. As Time noted, now this shy South African with Asperger's syndrome who escaped a brutal childhood and overcame personal tragedy bends governments and industry to the force of his ambition. When producing a biography of Elon Musk, perhaps the greatest challenge is partly separating fact from fiction. The overwhelming mass of information about the man can actually hinder clear conclusions rather than help them. Another issue, however, is that of separating what you instinctively feel must be true about someone based purely on their external achievements from how the person actually sees the world and has pursued these goals. Probably the best barometer for measuring how the general public might perceive Elon Musk is his Wikipedia page, where the bare bones of his life are arranged in the most accessible platform. The opening 3 paragraphs of this page explains how he is an entrepreneur and business magnate, listing the companies and ventures with which he is most associated: Zip2, X.com, PayPal, SpaceX, Tesla, The Boring Company, Neuralink, and OpenAI. It devotes a full paragraph to various controversies that have swirled around Musk, ranging from the investigations by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, through to his distribution of alleged COVID-19 misinformation. It also quotes, inevitably, the fact that Musk has amassed a level of wealth seen by few entrepreneurs in history. With an estimated net worth of around $221 billion US as of March 2022, Musk is the wealthiest person in the world, according to both the Bloomberg Billionaires Index and the Forbes Real-Time Billionaires list. The bullet points of Musk's life, however, only get us so far in understanding the man. As we go deeper into our analysis and narrative, we will certainly find a highly complex individual, but also one who possesses a quite singular ability to think and to apply his thoughts and conclusions to the most intimidating real-world problems. Elon Musk is not like most people, but nor is he metaphorically on an entirely different planet from the rest of us. What I would suggest is that Musk is a man who, with admittedly acute brain power and an intimidating capacity for sheer hard work, breaks down the barriers between thought and action. In this regard, as we shall see, he has much to teach us. Chapter 1. from South Africa to the USA. Going back to where it began, one thing is clear. Elon Musk's childhood, his parents, even his more distant ancestry, are anything but conventional. Here, perhaps, we unearth many of the roots of his later innovative and driven approach to life. In many ways, Musk's early years were not easy ones, but they were formative. He seemingly emerged from childhood and adolescence as someone energetically ready to defy norms and ignore predictability. He also went into his adult years apparently comfortable with the sensation of standing on his own 2 feet, exploring the world without fear or the need for external validation or guidance. Combined with a remarkable intelligence, it would be a potent brew of personality. Parental influence. While Elon Musk has become indelibly associated with a version of the American dream, he was actually born in Pretoria, South Africa, on 28 June 1971. South Africa was, at this time, a place of both landed and commercial wealth, towering over the most abject and adjacent poverty. The nation was framed both internally and internationally by apartheid politics, which imposed a rigorous segregation between black and white South Africans. It was a land, environment, and culture that tended to breed toughness and resilience as standard. Musk's parents were no exception to this rule. May Musk, Elon's mother, is one of the more striking characters in biographical parentage. Striking applies both physically and psychologically. Since her teenage years, and to this day, May has been a working model, her evergreen beauty bringing her picture spreads in high-profile magazines. At the age of 69, for example, she became a cover girl model. She is also a successful dietitian and businesswoman. Like her son, May's life has the substance of a weighty biography. Indeed, she published a memoir entitled A Woman Makes a Plan, Advice for a Lifetime of Adventure, Beauty, and Success in 2019, not least because of the mentally expansive nature of her childhood. She was actually born in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada, on 19 April 1948, although just 2 years later her family moved to South Africa. Her parents were the most extraordinary characters, as if cast from an adventure novel. Her father was Dr. Joshua Norman Haldeman, a successful and noted chiropractor, but whose profession played second fiddle to a life of adventure, which he shared with his wife Winifred Wynne Josephine Fletcher, a dance instructor. Joshua grew up in the Canadian outdoors, forging a spirit for grit, danger, and adventure. His pastimes or pursuits including rodeo riding, boxing, wrestling, rope spinning, and flying. He acquired a private pilot's license and a light aircraft to go with it. The 1950 move to South Africa was something of an impulse, rejecting what he saw as the political and moral limitations of Canada, Vance 2015-34, and embracing uncertainty in a distant, colorful, and spacious land. The fact that he had a family, May was one of 5 children, didn't dissuade him. He had expectations that children were quite capable of looking after themselves, if given the freedom and character to do so. Once in South Africa, Joshua and Wynne embarked on genuine adventures, which on occasions graced the pages of national newspapers. In 1952, for example, the couple made a precarious flight of some 35,400 kilometers, 22,000 miles, in their single-engine light aircraft, heading up from Africa to Norway and Scotland before making the return trip. The next year, he made another aerial voyage with Wynne and his son Scott, a 12,900-kilometer, 8,000-mile exploration of Central Africa. In 1954, he achieved international renown when he flew the hard-worked aircraft up the east coast of Africa, then across Asia to the coast of Australia and back again, clocking up an extraordinary 53,000 kilometers, 33,000 miles, in the process. In total, between 1950 and 1970, Joshua Haldeman flew across 80 countries and territories around the world. He held prominent positions in South African flying organizations, including being the co-founder and president of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, AOPA, of South Africa, and serving on the South African Air Navigation Regulations Committee for 5 years. He and Wynne were also very keen-eyed target shooters, both winning national pistol shooting competitions and becoming leading figures in club and national shooting associations. As if the Haldemans' CV wasn't impressive enough, they were also dedicated amateur explorers and archaeologists, the young May accompanying them on journeys into remote corners of the African continent. Joshua was particularly interested in finding the fabled lost city of the Kalahari, and from 1953 made a total of 12 land and aerial expeditions, encountering many of Africa's tribespeople and much of its wildlife along the way. His explorations were tragically, but in some ways fittingly, brought to an end in 1974 when he was killed in a plane crash. May was certainly the product of the unfettered and fearless ambition of her parents, and much of her undaunted spirit would be channeled into her own children. May was, of course, but one half of the parental equation. Elon's father was a local Pretoria citizen called Errol Musk, who met and ardently pursued the beautiful May when both were in their teenage years, dating intermittently until May accepted Errol's repeated proposals of marriage, leading to a wedding in 1970. Vance, 2015, 37. His parents, South African Henry James and English-born Cora Amelia Musk, were bright individuals, and Elon would be particularly close to Cora, or Nana. Errol was a practical man, forging a successful career as a mechanical and electrical engineer and a building project and property manager. Much later, a media story circulated that Errol Musk had been the owner of a South African emerald mine. This story even spun out to claim in some sources that Elon and his brother Kimball sold some of these jewels in the USA to give them a financial head start. In 2019, Elon himself exposed the story as an absolute myth, explaining on Twitter on 28 December, he didn't own an emerald mine, and I worked my way through college, ending up $100,000 in student debt. I couldn't even afford a second PC at Zip2, so programmed at night, and website only worked during day. Where is this BS coming from? May and Errol provided, initially at least, a stable and financially comfortable life for the young Elon. The family expanded with the arrival of Elon's brother Kimball in 1972, then a sister, Tosca, in 1974. His siblings would be important to Elon as he grew into the world, especially his brother Kimball, with whom he would share several geographical and commercial adventures. Learning curve. One of the most insightful pictures of Elon Musk as a child comes from the research of journalist Ashley Vance, whose book Elon Musk, How the Billionaire CEO of SpaceX and Tesla is Shaping Our Future, drew upon many hours of interviews with Musk himself. The impression is of a child with an above-average intelligence and an insatiable appetite for learning. He was, and remains, an avid reader, devouring both fiction and non-fiction, from Tolkien's Lord of the Rings through to the Encyclopedia Britannica, which he read in its entirety. It became quickly evident to those around him that Elon had an extraordinary memory, retaining even highly technical information with apparent ease. Retrieving that information rapidly and accurately became something of a party trick. It was a faculty that would serve him extremely well in his future endeavors, and which is still an object of fascination for those hungry to boost mental performance. More about Musk's mental abilities is therefore discussed in Chapter 6. Across his life, Musk has also been formidably adept at self-learning. Give him the books and resources, and he will absorb the content with speed, without the requirements for external tutoring. Even allowing for motherly adoration, May Musk clearly saw something exceptional in her eldest son, even in his early single-digit years. In interview, May was asked when she recognized that there might be something different about this little boy. Her answer, "From the age of 3. He just reasoned with me so well, and I didn't know how he could figure out things." While a strong intelligence in the young is never something to be discouraged, it can bring its own set of problems. According to Vance and other sources, the young Musk was something of an island amidst a sea of childhood conformity. Other students would note his mental detachment, Elon often lost in processing thoughts and ideas, and this could at times have an alienating effect among his peers. Musk was self-aware about the way he differed to those around him. In an interview with podcast host Joe Rogan, Musk remembered, "I think when I was, 5 or 6 or something, I thought I was insane." Rogan asked why Musk felt that to be the case. Because it was clear that other people did not. Their mind wasn't exploding with ideas all the time. It was just strange. It was like, I am strange. Musk felt that his perceived oddness had to be hidden from wider society. "I hoped they wouldn't find out, because they might, put me away or something." But at the same time, the racing mind held promise and tremendous energy. When describing his inner life to Rogan, Musk said, "It's like a never-ending explosion." Soon, the young Elon would also have to contend with a wider set of problems. In 1979, his parents divorced. It was the beginning of some tumultuous times for the members of the fragmenting Musk family. Immediately following the separation, Elon went to live with his mother, as did Kimball and Tosca, but after about a year he decided to move to live with his father. Kimball joined him shortly afterwards. According to Vance, the move to live with Errol was partly driven by familial logic. Errol didn't have any of his children living with him, whereas May had 3, and Musk said that this seemed unfair. Vance 2015-42. While much of the detail of this period is appropriately firewalled behind personal memories and recollections, it is a matter of public record that the time Elon and Kimball spent living with their father was not a happy one. The patchwork of published recollections has alleged that Errol was a gloomy, tense, and disciplinarian presence, one that fostered acute tensions with the 2 growing boys. An illustrative example of Errol's approach described by Vance was Errol's response to Elon's stated vision of going to live in the USA. Errol stopped employing the familiar housekeepers and made Elon do the chores instead, as an example of what life would be like for him in America. Nevertheless, there were some positive inputs. Errol was a well-off parent, and the 2 boys experienced much foreign travel and an environment with plentiful tools for learning, such as shelves of books. Errol was also a man with an engineering outlook on life, and much of that seems to have rubbed off on his sons. Elon and Kimball would accompany their father to building sites and there gain some hands-on skills. Basic electrics, carpentry, plumbing, bricklaying. Although none of these skills would burgeon into a career for Elon and Kimball, they did teach important lessons about practical problem-solving. To this day, Musk has a very physical understanding of engineering, pulling down the walls between theory and physical action. Somewhat less constructively, Elon also became an experimenter with homemade pyrotechnics, creating his own explosives and propellants through improvisational, self-taught chemistry, with some spectacular and doubtless alarming effects. It was clear early on that Elon was the type of person who liked to make things happen in the real world. In 2015, Errol Musk gave an interview to Forbes Africa and threw his own light upon the paths and capabilities of his sons. He explained that Elon was an introvert thinker, the type of person who might go to a party and spend more time studying the host's library of books. Errol presents Kimball as the more socially oriented of the 2 boys, whereas Elon appeared driven by intense intellectual curiosity about ideas and possibilities. But one story has a particular relevance to the direction Elon was eventually to follow. Elon's youth corresponded with the true dawn of the personal computer. Having been almost exclusively the province of government and business since their invention in the 1940s and 50s, digital computers achieved affordability and widespread public distribution from the 1980s, laying the foundations for a digital revolution that continues to this day. According to the interview with Elon Musk, when Elon was just 11 years old, his interest was piqued by the spread of computing, and he asked his father about the possibility of going on a computer training course. Errol knew of an international computer event to be hosted at the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, but which did not allow children to participate. Under Elon's persistence, however, Errol managed to book his son a seat at the 3-hour-long inaugural lecture. Elon was under instructions to sit quietly at the side of the lecture, respectfully dressed in jacket, shirt, and tie. At one point, Errol went off with Kimball to get some food, and when they returned, the lecture had finished, and Elon was not where they had left him. According to Errol, they waited about before going in search of Elon, eventually finding him deep in discussion with visiting experts from England. As Errol walked up to the group, one of the professors told Errol that the young boy really needs to get his hands on one of these computers. Cabaz, 2015. It was solid advice. Computers revolutionized Elon's relationship with the world. Even within the limitations of the technology at the time, programmable computers offered a seemingly unlimited vista for invention, and this clearly chimed with Elon. The first computer he owned was a Commodore VIC-20, which has its place in the Computer Hall of Fame for being the first computer of any type to sell 1 million units. Compared to today's machines, its specs were almost laughably constrained. It had just 5 kilobytes of memory. Yet Elon dove into its possibilities with a compulsion that would become a signature trait. In just 3 sleepless days, he worked through the entire basic programming language course that came with the computer, a program that was meant to take months. Notably, Musk remembered that his father was actually quite dismissive of the device, seeing it as something that was not for real engineering. Vance, 2015-45. This perspective was ignored. The full picture of the relationship between Elon Musk and his eldest son is still somewhat hidden in the shadows, though a patchwork of details and inferences have emerged over the years in interviews. What is clear, however, is that the alienation between father and son became total. In an interview with Neil Strauss for Rolling Stone magazine in 2017, Elon stated, "He was such a terrible human being. You have no idea. My dad will have a carefully thought-out plan of evil. He will plan evil." Musk took readily to computers, finding a logical home within their languages, circuits, and outputs. Notably, in 1984, Musk developed a science fiction game called Blastar, which ran on just 169 lines of code. The 1980s was a time in which legions of early computer adopters spent hours tapping program instructions line by line into their computers, the keyboard labor eventually yielding an on-screen game. The South African publication PC and Office Technology were sufficiently impressed with the efficiency and fun of Blastar that they published the source code, from which Musk earned $500. Blastar is still available today, playable directly through a web interface. Redolent of a Space Invaders scenario, Blastar's opening screen has the leanest of instructions. Mission: destroy alien freighter carrying deadly hydrogen bombs and status beam machines. Use joystick for control and fire button to shoot. Even today, the author speaks from experience of trying the game, there is genuine playability and challenge in the game. Computers would be an abiding passion for Musk throughout his teenage years and beyond, but it would be wrong to give the impression that the young man was something of a sequestered geek. In fact, Elon, Kimball, and a host of friends and relatives had plenty of robust life experiences during this time, not least because they seemed free to pursue minor adventures largely without adult supervision. It is worth reminding ourselves that South Africa at this time was a country with many rough corners. blighted by terrible levels of poverty, divided by racial politics, and suffering from one of the highest rates of violence in the world, a rate that climbed vertiginously during Elon's youth. Yet the brothers would make rail trips between Pretoria and Johannesburg. The latter, by the 1990s, was widely described in the press as the most dangerous city in the world, where they needed wits and awareness to stay out of trouble, and perhaps saw a slice of life often hidden from polite company. During his high school years, Elon also experienced the self-conscious agonies of bullying, both mental and physical, over a period of some 3 to 4 years. Musk's distinctive mannerisms could paint a target on his back for those children who were less tolerant of anyone deviating from the norm. Some of the episodes of bullying were violent. In one incident, while at Bryanston High School, a boy crept up behind Musk while he was sat at the top of a flight of concrete stairs, kicked him in the back of the head, then threw him down the stairs from top to bottom. It should be noted that Musk moved through 6 different schools during his childhood, a fact that he admits made it difficult to make friends. This brutal opening action was the signal for other boys to pile in onto Musk, kicking him relentlessly and smashing his head against the ground. Kimball actually feared for his brother's life. The injuries Musk sustained from this beating required hospitalization, a full week off school, and later, even some reconstructive surgery on his nose. Other delights of these years included the bully gangs beating up one of Elon's friends until he stopped hanging around with him. Eventually, life reached a more stable plateau for Musk when he attended the Pretoria Boys High School, and the violent bullying receded. Here, Musk was a bright and engaged student, although not a standout one academically. Through all the distractions of teenage years, Musk's interest in computers remained undimmed, however, and he was selected for a school computer coding program, learning languages such as BASIC, COBOL, and Pascal. But as Musk moved towards adulthood, his passion for computing fused with another drive, a deep desire to move to the USA. Musk outlined the way that these two mental draws interacted in an interview in China in 2014. I should say that when I was a kid, I didn't really have any grand designs. The reason I started programming computers was because I liked computer games, and I played lots of computer games. And I learned that if I wrote software and sold it, then I could get more money and buy better computers. So it wasn't really some grand visionary thing. But when I was growing up, I read lots of books. They were very often set in the United States, and it seemed that a lot of new technology was being developed in the United States. I thought, okay, I really want to work on new technology, so I want to get to Silicon Valley. When I was growing up, Silicon Valley seemed like some mythical place, like Mount Olympus or something. The fascination for and desire to travel to foreign lands is a commonplace yearning in the young. But it is somewhat rarer for such impulses to be tied closely to a specific industry, or at least an industry outside the performing arts. It is even more rare for yearning to become practical action, especially in a young man of just 17 years old. Yet, this is exactly the journey Musk began at this tender age. Keen to leave South Africa, Musk saw Canada as the key entry point to life in North America, not least because his mother's Canadian citizenship was transferable to her children, thanks to some recent changes in immigration legislation. Musk had an added incentive to head overseas in that it would enable him to elude South Africa's compulsory military service. Musk began the long process of filing for emigration, using 5 months of this time by beginning a computing and engineering degree at the University of Pretoria. Eventually, the papers were all signed and confirmed, and Elon Musk embarked on a new beginning halfway across the world. Canada. Given the adventurous precedents in Elon Musk's ancestry and own background, it is probably unsurprising that his initially solo move to Canada should be heavily unscripted. His first port of call was Montreal, in the east of the country. There, Musk intended to stay with an uncle. But in those pre-email days, there was a lag in communications, and on arrival, Elon found that the relative was now actually living in Minnesota. So he initially crashed at a youth hostel while he planned his next move. In Canada, he also had a second cousin in the province of Saskatchewan, the province from which his maternal grandfather hailed. And thus, he took an epic bus journey of some 3,050 kilometers, 1,900 miles, to the small city of Swift Current, not far from the U.S.-Canadian border. Once settled at a reasonably fixed address, Musk's next priorities were work and money. Musk's future as the world's richest man was at this point simply inconceivable, as he has an experienced understanding of low-paid physical labor in entry-level work. His employment in the first months of living in Canada included farm work, log cutting, and boiler cleaning. The latter was by all accounts the worst of the bunch, involving crawling into the boiler of a lumber mill and scraping off steaming hot debris from the inside, exiting every 30 minutes to prevent death from heat exhaustion. In a notable testimony to Musk's tenacious nature, at the beginning of the week Musk started this job, there were 30 men assigned, but by the end of the week, only 3 were still hanging in there, Musk being one of them. Although Elon initially emigrated on his own, his mother and siblings gradually began the process of shifting their home to Canada. Kimball was the first to arrive. The close relationship between the two brothers doubtless gave Elon a boost. The brothers had a strong, dynamic energy flowing between them, a force that would grow into more developed plans and schemes for achieving success in North America. But Elon also reconnected with academia, in 1989 enrolling in Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, back in the far east of Canada, studying for a Bachelor of Science degree in physics and economics. In 2013, Elon gave an insightful interview about his time at Queen's to the Queen's Alumni Review. He described his time at Queen's as fun and interesting and formative. He explained that, "One particular thing that I learned at Queen's, both from faculty and students, was how to work collaboratively with smart people and make use of the Socratic method to achieve commonality of purpose." The reference to the Socratic method requires a pause for thought. It involves a dialogic exploration of a hypothesis or argument, the participants using a process of deeply probing questions, not only to interrogate ideas, but also to expose the values, principles, and beliefs of those in the debate. Participants in a Socratic dialogue, therefore, are placed in a state of productive discomfort, examining themselves and their relationship to the world, not just an abstracted concept, and exposing assumptions and conformist ideas. In this pedagogical tactic, we can see a connection to Musk's later advocacy of reasoning from first principles, moving past accepted logic and ideas and investigating a proposition or problem from the roots up. For a deeper look into Musk's application of first principles and other strands of his intellectual outlook, see Chapter 6. In contrast to when Musk was at school, Queen's revealed Musk's exceptional intellectual powers more clearly to those around him. Some of his student contemporaries remember him as standout bright, even among the capable individuals of a respected university. He was highly focused, reinforced with competitive instincts, but he also embraced the wider opportunities that came with student life, fitting in time for romance and socializing alongside studying. Musk also began demonstrating an entrepreneurial aptitude. His knowledge of computers played out well within the tech-hungry student community, and he began to earn money by repairing computers or building them to order. Outside the college walls, Elon and Kimball also pursued something of a networking strategy with influential business leaders. Driven by both curiosity and confidence, they would contact such people out of the blue and persuade them to give time for the brothers to interview them. One of these contacts was Peter Nicholson, a high-ranking executive in the Bank of Nova Scotia. The brothers left a positive impression on Nicholson, the young man coming across as likable, interested, and determined. Through this self-made connection, Musk forged a connection with both Nicholson and his daughter Christy. A particularly formative insight came from Musk's connection to Nicholson. One summer during the early 1990s, he secured an internship at the Bank of Nova Scotia, working directly for the head of strategy. As a demanding assignment for the switched-on young man, he was asked to analyze the bank's third-world debt portfolio to see what value could be discerned within the portfolio following some South American debt defaults. Evidently, doing his job with gusto for $14 an hour, Elon unearthed something he felt could be a winner for the bank, and for anyone who capitalized on it. He spotted that the debt of certain South American countries was backstopped by the U.S. government, and the difference between the backstop value of what were known as Brady bonds, named after U.S. Treasury Secretary Nicholas Brady, and the actual value of the debt was such that astute traders could potentially double their money, all protected by the U.S. federal government. Elon excitedly took the idea to his immediate boss, who saw the value in it and ran it up the flagpole for the CEO of the company. There, the idea was killed, the CEO reasoning that there was too much risk in Argentinian and Brazilian debt. The rejection was to Elon's intense frustration. He felt that the bankers were missing the point entirely, and equally missing the opportunity for huge amounts of money guaranteed by the U.S. Treasury. He later told Ashley Vance that this moment made him realize how all the bankers did was copy everyone else. Vance, 2015, 83. His disappointment quickly turned into the confidence that he would eventually be able to take on the banks, exploiting their tendency towards conformity and predictable responses. Here was a pattern that would repeat. Crossing the border. Although Canada was, and remains, a country with a fond place in Musk's cultural outlook, he never lost sight of his original goal, to cross the border into the USA and place himself at the center of the tech revolution. Furthermore, the 1980s saw the foundation of the Internet as a potentially revolutionary technology. It was in the 1990s that the revolution became a global reality, transforming the nature of human communications, retail and information data exchange. And much of this revolution was being driven from within the USA. Musk's first step across the border came in 1992 when he transferred to the University of Pennsylvania, entering the Ivy League of American education. Elon would study business and physics, and he thrived in the upper atmospheres of debate and research, surrounded by minds often as inquiring as his own, although few could match his relentless work ethic. While at Penn, he made an important and lifelong friend, Adeo Ressi, a student who would later go on to be a dynamic tech entrepreneur and investor in his own right, also sitting on the board of the X Prize Foundation, funding technology projects deemed to be for the long-term benefit of humanity. The two hit it off quickly as friends and rented a large house together, a building they notoriously converted into an informal nightclub that could hold as many as 500 people at one time. This was a semi-professionally run operation. Clubbers would pay $5 on entrance. An even larger property subsequently rented was similarly converted. As this story was related to Vance, Ressi was more the party animal, while Musk, who appears to have been a restrained drinker, kept his focus on making sure the event stayed ordered and organized. As something of an aside, it is interesting to note a little more about why Elon chose the combination of business and physics to study at university. It is actually not a common pairing, the worlds of science and commerce often sitting at a distance from one another academically, despite the value of fusing the two being evident. Jimmy Soni, in his book The Founders, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, and the Company That Made the Internet, refers to an interview with Musk in the American Physical Society newsletter, in which Musk opted to do business as a form of protective power play for the future. I was concerned that if I didn't study business, I would be forced to work for someone who did study business, and they would know some special things that I didn't know. That didn't sound good, so I wanted to make sure that I knew those things too. Quoted in Sony 2022-62. Physics, on the other hand, provided intellectual rigor. He felt that if he could handle physics mathematics, then business mathematics would be no problem. But it also intersected with those profound questions of life, the universe, and everything, to quote Douglas Adams' The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a favorite Musk read, which held a special allure for Musk. In short, business was pragmatic, physics was important. Penn seemed to be the ideal environment in which Musk could work, form, and shape ideas that would later become central to his work as an entrepreneurial engineer and unbound innovator. During an address at Penn in 2009, he explained, "When I was at Penn, I started thinking about what would most affect the future of humanity. The three things that I thought would be the most effective were the Internet, the transition to a sustainable energy economy, and space exploration, particularly extension of life to multiple planets. That's not to say I thought I would be involved in all those things, but, as it turns out, I am." The specifics of some of these interests were explored in several high-marking research papers while at Penn. In these, Musk worked at length on the possibilities for massive solar cell plants soaking up vast amounts of free energy from the sun and how to use the energy efficiencies of ultracapacitors to provide power to all manner of vehicles. Such lofty ruminations are not uncommon at university. What is striking, however, is that all of these visions persisted as driving forces in Elon's ambitions, and later became realized in the world at the most exceptional scale. It was in the summer of 1994 that we perhaps see the true foundations of Musk's entrepreneurial future being laid. Heading down to Silicon Valley, he secured 2 internships, both tapping strongly into his interests. One of them was at the Pinnacle Research Institute on Los Gatos, whose work focused particularly on the development and applications of ultracapacitors. These devices, as we have seen, had already caught Musk's attention. An ultracapacitor is essentially an electrical energy storage device, but one configured to hold very high electrical charges, release that energy quickly, recharge fast, and handle many charge-recharge cycles. This is possible because the performance of the device is superior to that of electrolytic capacitors and standard or rechargeable batteries. The properties of the ultracapacitor make them particularly suited to any application requiring repeated and sudden bursts of energy, as in the acceleration and braking of an electric car. But Musk had visions of these devices being applied to a whole world of future mechanisms and systems, from vehicles through the space-age energy guns. The internship at Pinnacle Research drove and intensified Musk's enthusiasm for energy research. Notably, he also found time to ruminate on ideas about the future of banking online, not least the possibility of building a full internet banking service, incorporating not only savings and checking accounts, but also delivering services such as brokerage and insurance. Vance 2015-84. Few of those around him at the time took the developed musings seriously, not least because at that moment in history the full potential of the Internet had yet to be imagined, let alone realized. But like many of Elon's early ideas, once it was embedded, it would resurface later. One thing is clear from any biography of Elon Musk. He doesn't readily accept statements that something can't be done. But Pinnacle Research was not his only internship at this time. This was just where he spent the daytime hours. As evening closed in, he went to his second internship at Rocket Science Games based in Palo Alto. Founded in 1993 by Stephen Gary Blank and Peter Barrett, Rocket Science Games was a growing game studio, Musk joining the company shortly after it had received a $12 million funding injection from Sega Enterprises and the Bertelsmann Music Group. The company was an exciting place to work. Known for the way it brought in talent from both the movie and tech industry to produce some of the most potent graphics in the gaming industry, aided by the hardware transition from plug-in games cartridges to the more digitally powerful CD-ROMs. At first, Elon was used to write basic code, but that box didn't hold him for long. He quickly impressed seasoned coders and industry specialists with his irresistible package of skills and psychological deliverables, the ability to work impressively long hours without apparently fading or succumbing to stress, a deep knowledge of both hardware and software, independent problem-solving capabilities characteristic of the self-taught programmer. Soon, he was taking on far more advanced duties for rocket science games, including writing drivers to support joystick and mouse interaction with the game's consoles. Around this time, Elon and Kimball embarked on a now somewhat famous road trip, funded by Kimball's sale of part of a franchise he ran for college pro painters, the proceeds being enough to purchase a second-hand car, notably without working air conditioning. Now they had wheels, they embraced ambitions to traverse the USA, beginning their trip in California, then driving up to Colorado, Wyoming, South Dakota, and Illinois, Vance 2015-64. On the way back up towards Penn, where Elon would start his final year of studies in the fall. While on the road, the brothers had plenty of time to freewheel through various architectures for business startups, including one for a new system of electronic health records, to improve collaboration and information exchange between physicians. A business plan was begun, but the brothers didn't feel the buzz from the idea, and it was soon dropped. Musk graduated from Penn in 1995 with dual bachelor's degrees in business and physics. By this time, he had both gained some industry experience through multiple internships, each directly relevant to key areas of interest, plus he had gained an exceptional theoretical education. It seemed for a time that higher education beckoned, and he was accepted to do a physics PhD at Stanford. Had he stuck to this path, it is interesting to speculate about Musk's future outcomes. But as history now knows, Musk dropped out of his Stanford course after just 2 days. Education was over, at least in its formal context. It was time for his first startup. Chapter 2. From Zip2 to PayPal. Elon Musk's ambition and engineering insight intersected with the rise of the Internet with perfectly fortuitous timing. The first e-commerce company had been established back in 1982, Boston Computer Exchange, which traded in used computers, but it took another decade before the next major online shopping experience arrived, in the form of web-based bookstore Bookstacks Unlimited. Incidentally, this company would be part inspiration for the launch of a new online bookseller, Amazon.com, in 1995. The startup headed by tech entrepreneur and future fellow space visionary Jeff Bezos. Although Amazon was initially focused on books as its sole product, Bezos was actually in the opening stages of a vision to build the Everything Store, an online platform where consumers could purchase just about anything they wanted. Underpinning such enterprises was the exponentially accelerating use of the Internet and computers among the wider population, both in the USA and abroad. With the advent of web browsers such as Netscape Navigator and search engines such as Yahoo, anyone with a computer could now start to explore the widening landscape of the World Wide Web. Computers themselves had also evolved, from the clunky affairs of the 1980s into practical, flexible, affordable, and increasingly powerful models, driven by operating systems such as Windows 95, introduced in 1995 as a replacement for the previous Windows 3.1, and Apple's Mac OS. The cumulative effect of all this amplification of technology in society is indicated by the fact that in 1991 there was a single accessible e-commerce site, but by 1994 there were 2,738. Just 1 year later, in 1995, there were 23,500. The rocketing growth was just beginning, however, and if Musk was going to make his mark in the new era, now was the time to strike. But first, he needed the idea. Zip2. Inspiration came in the color yellow. During one of his internships, Musk had met a salesman from Yellow Pages. Viewed from the present age, the traditional Yellow Pages, massive, near-luminous printed business directories, hundreds of pages thick and listing thousands of local companies, seems of almost biblical antiquity. But for several generations, it was the primary reference tool for finding local shops, goods, and services. However, the company evidently recognized that times were changing, and the salesman spoke hesitantly to Musk about the possibility of companies listing themselves on a new online platform. While the pitch didn't convince Musk of the Yellow Pages proposition, it did trigger the idea for doing something superior. Joined by his brother Kimball, therefore, in November 1995, Musk registered the company Global Link Information Network, GLIN, and began his first startup. The core concept for GLIN was that it would fuse an online business directory with searchable digital mapping, enabling the user both to find the business they needed and to get directions to it. Companies would pay to have their details placed in the service, which would naturally involve attracting them to the product in the first place. In the company's initial press release, there seemed to be some uncertainty over the name of the service. The San Francisco Chronicle reported that the new product is called either Virtual City Navigator or Total Info. It was apparent that the Musk brothers were on a steep learning curve. The funds to support GLIN as a startup were meager at best. Both brothers had sunk their own savings into the venture, and Errol also gave a cash injection. Further investment, $6,000, came from the Canadian businessman Greg Curry, who also acted in a mentoring role over the next few years of growth, providing the inexperienced entrepreneurs with sense checks on ideas and decisions. With a very compact startup team, which also soon included 3 salespeople, the Musk brothers rented a small office in Palo Alto. Even with the collective investments, money was tight on every front, and the startup infrastructure was on a shoestring. At a presentation at SpaceX on 8 October 2003, Elon explained more about these early days of experimental entrepreneurialism, and told his audience not only about the austere physical conditions they endured, but also some of the basic problems of getting people to understand what they were selling in the first place. We started getting some interest. Half the time it would be like, "What's the internet?" even in Silicon Valley. But then occasionally someone would buy it and we'd get a little bit of money. There were basically only about 6 of us. There was myself, my brother who I'd convinced to come down from Canada, and then a friend of my mom's, and then 3 salespeople who we hired on contingency by putting an ad in the newspaper. But things were pretty tough in the early going. I didn't have any money. In fact, I had negative money. I had huge student debts. In fact, I couldn't afford a place to stay and an office at the same time, so I rented an office instead. I actually got a cheaper office than a place to stay, so I slept on a futon and showered at the YMCA. A further detail is that despite GLIN being an internet startup, the company at first did not have access to Wi-Fi. This problem was solved by Elon coming to an arrangement with the internet service provider that operated out of the floor below. Musk literally drilled a hole in his office wall and ran an Ethernet cable through the hole and down the stairs, connecting into an available router. Founding stories such as these are important in order to set Musk in his proper context as an entrepreneur. Some startup giants had advantages at the outset, such as emboldening injections of finance or the backstop of an already successful business. Elon Musk started with almost nothing and built up everything thereafter through the input of his own hands, intelligence, and labor, and through the teams under his ultimate authority. The first employees of GLIN were somewhat in awe at Musk's Herculean capacity for pulling extreme working hours without complaint or deterioration in performance. Only a robust biology could maintain this regime, but it also appears to derive from a defiant intolerance for anything that even hinted at the possibility of failure. Any discomfort, any problem, any illogicality seemed to be crushed with a combination of iron will and long hours. Musk indeed once stated, "My mentality is that of a samurai. I would rather commit seppuku than fail." seppuku, the slitting of the stomach as a ritual method of samurai suicide. The nihilistic military analogy here is absolutely pertinent. Musk will go to war with a problem, showing a pathological rejection of retreat. Gradually, the infrastructure and the superstructure of the product were built, with Musk himself doing the coding. 2 acquisitions significantly helped his effort. The first was obtaining a license to an existing database of business in the San Francisco Bay Area, home to more than 7 million people and experiencing a major growth in financial and technology industries. The second was free access to the content created by Navtech, a company founded in 1985 and by the 1990s one of the biggest digital mapwork producers in the world. The fusion of these 2 sources gave Musk's new product the spectrum of utility it required. The virtual city navigator was now taking shape and making sales, the latter courtesy of the skeleton sales crew. But it was still a grind to scale up the business, and it was clear that the company would need a substantial gear shift in capacity if it was to punch beyond its startup foundations. Everything changed, however, in 1996. The 1990s were a time when venture capitalists were hungry for tech investments, and valuations for startups could be soaring. One company on the lookout for new opportunities was More Davidow Ventures, established in 1983 in San Mateo, California. Its modern-day LinkedIn profile description captures its mission across time. For 30 years, the More Davidow Ventures MDV team has invested in early-stage technology-based startups that redefine or create large new markets. Senior executives from MDV met with the Musk brothers, who managed to convince the outsiders that Glynn could indeed be the next big thing. In response, MDV invested $3.5 million into the company. Now, everything would change. Ups and downs. With the multi-million-dollar investment from MDV, Musk had gone rapidly from startup visionary to piloting a fully fledged and established company. The changes ushered in by the investment were quickly apparent. One of the most high-profile shifts was that the company acquired a new and improved name, Zip2, its platform running under the URL www.zip2.com. It also took newer, bigger, and plusher offices to house the influx of fresh personnel. Many of the staff were professional computer engineers and coders. Their presence was quite a culture change for Musk, who up to that point had been used to doing the coding himself, using his self-taught skills. Vance explored the tension between Musk and the new tech staff, the latter bringing what they saw as more efficient and professional coding techniques. Musk, his powerful work ethic, and also his visions of how things could be done differently. Vance, 2015, 74-75. But the greatest of the staffing changes brought about by the MDV investment was the appointment, under MDV's direction, of a new Chief Executive Officer, CEO, Rich Sorkin, with Elon being moved into the role of Chief Technical Officer, CTO. Sorkin had what MDV regarded as a more solid and dependable industry pedigree. An economics graduate from Yale University, he had first worked at the powerful Boston-based management consultancy Bain & Company before going on to gain an MBA from Stanford in 1988, then heading out to Silicon Valley. He had joined Creative Labs, a U.S. subsidiary of the Singaporean company Creative Technology, where he headed up the company's Sound Blaster division. Sound Blaster sound cards became the standard consumer audio component in PCs during the 1990s, accounting for 7 out of every 10 computer sound cards sold globally. Put simply, for the investors, Sorkin had the track record that the young South African didn't yet possess, regardless of his other qualities. The decision would go on to have major consequences for Musk's relationship with Zip2. It seems clear from the investigative work of journalists such as Vance that Musk found the appointment of Sorkin uncomfortable. not least because ultimately Musk is a man who seems destined to lead, with his hands on the reins of strategy. Looking at some of Musk's later reflections upon business culture also throws light on what he sees as the problem of corporate conformity, with its focus on finance and shareholders rather than product development and innovation. In an interview for the Theoxa YouTube channel posted on 15 December 2020, Musk was asked to clarify what he saw as some of the problems in corporate America. One he identified in particular was the over-respect for the MBA. "I think there might be too many MBAs running companies. There's the MBAization of America, which I think is not that great. There should be more focus on the product and on the service itself, less time on board meetings, less time on financials. What's the point of a company at all? Why even have companies? A company is an assembly of people gathered together to create a product or service and deliver that product or service. Sometimes people lose sight of that. A company has no value in and of itself. It only has value to the degree that it is an effective allocator of resources to create goods and services that are of greater value than the costs or inputs." This perspective comes more than 25 years after Musk started his first business. But thinking back to his views on the missed Brady Bonds opportunity, we see a frustration with the traditional corporate outlook to this day. MBAs, in Elon's view, are not an automatic signal that companies are competent and innovative. Returning to Zip2, the changes in personnel brought navigational shifts in the overall direction of the company. The focus on signing individual business customers was rejected as too slow and labor-intensive, so Zip2 now looked at strategies for more dramatic and national scaling up. A plan to make partnerships with major telecoms companies didn't find its legs, but the company began to concentrate on selling its software product to newspapers so that they could develop their own advertising directories for customers. This avenue of the business found the money, with 140 newspaper websites developed by 1997, Sony, 2022-70. Zip2's innovations put the company in the press, marking it out in an increasingly competitive field, contested by the likes of Microsoft, CitySearch, Yahoo, Craigslist, and AOL. Google had not yet arrived on the scene, but would do so in 1998. Using the new Java programming language, Zip2 was more powerful and capable than ever, and included services such as restaurant seat reservation and digital navigation. Investors flocked to the company, including Knight Ridder, SoftBank Group Corp., Hearst, Pulitzer Publishing, Morris Communications, and the New York Times Company, Sony, 2022-70. The first two companies on this list invested $12.1 million alone. There was no doubt that the lives of the two brothers had changed profoundly and quickly. Gone were the days of cash-strapped improvisation and financial struggles. Now they were affluent and prominent, at the vanguard of the Silicon Valley revolution that was taking over America and spreading to the rest of the world. But all was not well at the top. Musk would have sincere arguments over strategy and implementation with senior Zip2 executives. According to Vance's research, Musk felt that Zip2 could do more to engage customers directly, rather than positioning itself behind the front of newspaper brands. Matters came to a head in 1998-99, truly pivotal years in Musk's career. Zip2's market was becoming a hard-fought one, and the company looked around for mergers and acquisitions that might give it greater leverage and increase its imperiled bottom line. In April 1998, the company announced that it would merge with its major competitor, CitySearch. Like Zip2, CitySearch was founded in 1995, also in California, and trod much the same ground as Zip2, providing an online city guide to businesses, services, retail, entertainment, and more, supported by mapping and travel directions. The proposed merger had an exciting logic to it. as the combined companies had more muscle to take on a new Microsoft competitor, Sidewalk. Jumping ahead a little, we should note that in 1999, Microsoft sold Sidewalk to CitySearch. The merger included the agreement that the company would run under the CitySearch name, although the CitySearch CEO, Charles Kahn, emphasized in the press that everything about the agreement is the merger of equals. We can maintain the best of both cultures and the best of both technologies. Yet, the merger would ultimately collapse. Musk himself swung against the deal, and there were concerns about the financial profile of CitySearch and also about how the merger would affect the status and roles of some Zip2 executives. The failure of the merger brought turmoil at the top of Zip2. According to Vance, Musk argued with Zip2's board that he should take the position of CEO from Sorkin, but instead the board, disaffected with Musk, took away Musk's title of chairman and replaced Sorkin with the venture capitalist Derek Proudian. Vance, 2015, 72. In essence, Musk had been demoted in the company that he had founded. There was a clear lesson here about retaining control over one's enterprises. The real game-changing event for Musk, however, came in February 1999. Out of the blue, Compaq Computer Corporation offered $307 million to buy Zip2. Compaq attempting to make its Alta Vista web search engine more competitive against the likes of Yahoo and America Online. The offer was accepted, and a huge celebratory party was thrown. For Musk, however, the takeover was a clear sign that it was time to exit Zip2 and move on to new horizons. He left Zip2 with $22 million, Kimball with $15 million. There is no doubt that the Zip2 part of his life had delivered a tough but formative learning experience for Elon Musk, with insights acquired into management styles, corporate governance, finance, the nature of mergers, and the direction of his own ambition. But viewed in the round, Musk's success had been astounding. In 1995, he started a company on a shoestring budget, and 4 years later, he was a multimillionaire. Now, his future projects would have means behind them. X.com. By all accounts, Musk fully embraced his newfound wealth, buying high-end property, a light aircraft, Musk had flying lessons, and a $1 million McLaren F1 sports car. The latter was notable because Musk, evidently comfortable with affluence and emerging celebrity, allowed CNN to film the delivery of the car. In the video, still available to watch online, a youthful and clearly excited Musk receives the F1, delivered via a huge, glossy truck. The video as a whole is clearly framed by public interest in the new breed of dot-com millionaires, typically young individuals catapulted rapidly into wealth, mentally attempting to acclimatize to their precipitous change in circumstances. Musk gives the viewer some context to what has happened. Back in '95, there weren't many people on the internet, and certainly most people weren't making any money at all. Most people thought that the internet was going to be a fad. Just 3 years ago, I was showering at the YMCA and sleeping on the office floor, and now I've got $1 million car and a few creature comforts. It is a moment in my life. But Musk also appears self-conscious about what the newfound wealth means both for him and for the way he is perceived. He states somewhat cryptically, "My values may have changed, but I'm not aware of my values having changed." Another presence in the video is Musk's fiancée, Justine Wilson. Musk had been dating Wilson off and on since their days together at Queen's University. According to Vance, Musk had relentlessly pursued Justine, a beautiful and bright scholar with a strong creative flair, and by 1999, the two were engaged. In the video, Justine is clearly overawed by the wealth on display. "It's $1 million sports car. It's decadent," she then cautiously adds, as if sensing the potential judgment on the other side of the screen. My fear is that we become spoiled brats, that you lose a sense of appreciation and perspective. But she acknowledges that it's the perfect car for Silicon Valley. It really is. Evidently, both Musk and Justine were undergoing psychological and social adjustment to their new financial reality. But this did not mean that Musk was taking his foot off the gas when it came to further projects. Connecting back to insights gained from his internship at the Bank of Nova Scotia, Musk's next target was the world of banking, specifically that of online banking. If Zip2 had taught him anything, it was the energy potential of building a business that was just at the beginning of a wider technological groundswell. Online banking was such an arena. The very first home online banking service dated back to 1980. It was established by United American Bank, subscription-paying customers using a special secure modem to access account information. There were several further web banking efforts during the 1980s and 1990s, but none truly disrupted the established over-the-counter models, and adoption was low. By 1999, only 0.4% of U.S. households were using online banking in some form. Security concerns were a big consideration for many potential customers, but the relentless growth of the Internet meant that at the end of the 1990s, most of the world's major banks were looking at how to capitalize on the emerging technology, and there were plenty of experimental startups in the financial sector. One of the biggest competitors for any startup was NetBank, founded in 1996 and based in Georgia. To give an idea of the volatility in the sector, however, NetBank's stock price oscillated between $3.50 and $83 in 1999 alone. Elon Musk would also join the race. The first incarnation of Musk's new vision was X.com, incorporated in March 1999. Musk had decided to maximize the disruption of traditional banking by offering an online financial services firm that covered the full spectrum of transactions: savings, checking accounts, loans, stock trading, mortgages, and insurance. It was a supremely risky venture, not least because each of the separate fields of finance had labyrinthine regulatory complexities. Plus, the coding challenge to support the online infrastructure would be immense. He would also be pushing into the headwinds blowing from the world's biggest banks. But Musk has never recoiled from a challenge, nor was he reticent about investing his own money. At startup, Musk put $12.5 million of his newfound wealth into X.com. A quick note about the quirky company name. Musk not only believed X.com was a compelling and interesting name, evocative rather than narrowly descriptive, but he also felt that the growing market for pocket-sized computing devices meant that X.com was a particularly easy and fast web address to tap into a miniature keyboard. Recognizing that X.com was wandering into areas of expertise he did not possess, Musk built his team. He brought on board 2 Canadian finance experts, Harris Fricker and Christopher Payne, and former Zip2 executive Ed Ho, an engineer and coding expert, as co-founders. Other talented engineers, lawyers, and financial experts were employed, often convinced to step into the high-risk venture by Musk's persuasive pitch about what was wrong with banking and how they were going to fix it. Together, the fresh team started to forge X.com. It was not to be an altogether happy marriage of minds. Tensions soon emerged between the co-founders, and particularly between Musk and Fricker. According to biographers such as Vance and Sony, Fricker found Musk's public promises of developing a full-service financial institution did not match the reality of what they were actually managing to produce, and the challenges they were facing. Relations deteriorated between members of the management team, and 5 months after the company was founded, Fricker made a demand. Either he takes over as the CEO, replacing Musk, or he leaves and takes most of the rest of the team with him. Musk, never someone to respond meekly to threats, would not relinquish his position at X.com, and Fricker followed through on his decision, taking much of the X.com team with him, including Ho. Elon still had X.com, but now effectively had to rebuild it. He did this without deflection or defeat. Musk convinced more and more engineers and experts to join the company, while also securing important regulatory licenses and insurances from the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, to trade in key financial fields. He even managed to forge a partnership arrangement with Barclays Bank. Despite the turmoil at management levels just months previously, X.com opened for business on 24 November 1999, the boss working 48 hours straight to oversee the launch. The new kid on the block certainly stirred up the world of banking. Through its online portal, it offered person-to-person, business-to-business, and customer-to-business payments, a groundbreaking shift away from payments by checks or over-the-counter. It was also aggressive about pulling in customers, offering a $20 cash card for sign-up and a $10 card for each new customer referral. There were no overdraft penalties. By early 2000, the company had more than 200,000 customers and were signing up others at a rate of about 4,000 a day. X.com was on the up, but there was still trouble at the top. In particular, X.com's investors were getting increasingly fidgety with Musk in his role as CEO, especially as the company was heading towards an initial public offering, IPO, the offering of company stock on a public exchange for the first time. Thus, in December 1999, Musk was replaced as the CEO by Bill Harris, who for the previous 2 years had been serving on the board of the accounting and tax software company Intuit. But by the beginning of the new millennium, X.com also had significant competitors. One of them was Confinity, a financial software company founded in December 1998 by Max Levchin and Peter Thiel, two individuals who would also go on to become legendary in the field of dot-com entrepreneurship. Initially, Confinity, who rented a small office space from X.com, focused on developing a payment system between users of Palm Pilot handheld devices. The founders quickly identified that the Palm Pilot system had limited legs for the feature, and instead switched their focus to developing a new digital wallet system for easy online payments. They called it PayPal. PayPal surged strongly into life, not least through its adoption as a payment method by the online auction site eBay, which alongside Amazon was a rising giant in the field in internet retail. Given its change in direction, PayPal was now a direct competitor to X.com. PayPal quickly moved into a new office, one not owned by Musk's company, and something of a commercial war raged between the two until peace negotiations began in March 2000. The two companies entered into discussions about a possible merger. It made sense. PayPal had a huge and growing customer database, while X.com had more in terms of cash reserves. The merger was brought to fruition, and the new larger company, running under the X.com name, as Musk was the largest shareholder, went forward, quickly securing major external funding investment and with a huge customer database. One key outcome of the merger was that Musk was restored as the CEO, Harris resigning. The merger between Confinity and X.com had parallels with the troubled marriage between Zip2 and CitySearch. The two companies had very different cultures, bosses, and approaches to technology, and the two entities, according to sources such as Vance, never fully fused into a single coordinated entity. The technological argument was particularly bitter among the engineers and management, with Musk wanting to take the company more down the line of Microsoft software, while PayPal employees gravitated towards open-source Linux systems. There were also growing problems with functionality, with frequent web outages, plus the volumes of online fraud were unnerving. The finances of the company were also taking a hit as costs escalated. Vance describes what happened next as one of the nastiest coups in Silicon Valley's long, illustrious history of nasty coups. Vance, 2015, 93. The context for this was that back in January 2000, Justine and Musk had married. The marriage between the couple, who divorced in 2008, is a topic unto itself, and not one that will be recounted in detail here. Yet, in 2010, Justine Musk published a long article in Marie Claire laying out what she saw as the truth about her position as a starter wife. From her perspective, she recounts being drawn in by Musk's intelligence, generosity, and persistence. In the article, however, she also detailed what she regarded as warning signs. According to her account, as they danced at their wedding reception, Elon said to her, "I am the alpha in this relationship," a statement that she said she shrugged off but over time felt was said seriously. In later response to similar comments, she retorted, "I am your wife, not your employee," to which Musk allegedly fired back, "If you were my employee, I'd fire you." Whatever the truth of these statements, it is apparent that the couple had issues to resolve. The Musks had married when X.com was running at full steam, and at the time Elon had simply been too busy to have a honeymoon. So in September 2000 he combined a fundraising trip to Australia with a honeymoon holiday to see the Olympics. But even as they boarded the flight, Musk had a sense that something was about to happen in his absence. Here he provides an overview in his own words in an interview with Max Chafkin. "I think it's not a good idea to leave the office when there are a lot of major things underway which are causing people a great deal of stress. It was a combination of needing to raise money, and I had gotten married earlier that year and not had any vacation or honeymoon or anything, so it was a combined financing trip/honeymoon. Anyway, we were away for 2 weeks and there was just a lot of worry, and that caused the management team to decide that I wasn't the right guy to run the company. I could have fought it really hard, but I decided rather than fight it at this critical time, it was best to sort of concede. I understood why they took the actions they did. Peter and Max and David and the other guys, they're smart people with generally the right motivations. They did what they thought was right, and I think for the right reasons, except that the reasons weren't valid, in my opinion. But it was hard to argue with the ultimate outcome, which was positive." There is some detail we can add here. As soon as Musk found out about the management coup once he had landed in Sydney, he immediately turned around and flew back to California. By his own account, he was reasonable when he met Levin and Thiel, and while he was naturally disappointed, he accepted that the decision had been made. He retained advisory roles, but the governing center of the company had shifted to the PayPal side of the equation, as evidenced by the fact that Thiel changed X.com's name back to PayPal within weeks of taking charge. Fate seems to have taken a rough attitude towards Musk's attempts to take a honeymoon. In the following December, Justine and Musk decided again to have a go at a romantic vacation, this time a 2-week trip to Brazil and South Africa. While on a South African game reserve, Musk contracted a particularly dangerous form of malaria, one that manifested itself in truly life-threatening symptoms when he returned to California. His condition was misdiagnosed by several doctors until one finally understood what they were dealing with. The correct diagnosis undoubtedly saved Musk's life, but it was a close-run thing, and he spent a total of 10 days in intensive care. It took him 6 months to recover. He imparted a lesson from this experience to Vance. Vacations will kill you. Vance, 2015, 101. Musk had played a driving role in building X.com/PayPal to the position it had achieved, with a revenue of circa $240 million per annum and hundreds of employees. It went into its IPO in February 2002, the share price opening at $13, but climbing to $20.09 by the end of the day's trading, generating more than $61 million of revenue for the company. This was despite the fact that, according to industry analysts, PayPal had actually lost $283 million between March 1999 and the end of 2001. Musk was still the company's largest shareholder, but even greater things were to come. In July 2002, eBay, by now a true leader of the e-commerce industry, by 2001 it had the largest customer user base of any e-commerce company, sought to buy PayPal, offering a prodigious $1.5 billion. The offer was deemed too good to turn down. From this deal, Musk, who was holding 11.72% of the shares, received a post-tax personal windfall of $180 million. He no longer had control of a company. What he did have was a level of wealth that would truly open up even greater possibilities. New Horizons. Throughout this book, we will have occasions to think more on the topic of Elon Musk's wealth and what it means to be one of the wealthiest people on the planet. Extreme wealth does tend to attract a lot of media fire, and Musk has taken more than his fair share of spite and accusation on the issue, particularly over topics such as his payment of taxes. One important point to note: in December 2021, Musk explained that he would pay $11 billion in tax for the year, potentially a record amount of tax paid by a single individual. In a video shown on YouTube, Musk provides a considered thought on why it might not be a good idea to tax very wealthy individuals too heavily, because it relies on the assumption that the taxes collected would be put to better use by government. Like, if you think of assets beyond a certain level that are far beyond, let's say, somebody's ability to consume, then at a certain point, really, what you are doing is capital allocation. So it's not money for personal expenditures. What you're doing is capital allocation. And it does not make sense to take the job of capital allocation away from people who have demonstrated great skill in capital allocation and give it to an entity that has demonstrated very poor skill in capital allocation, which is the government. I mean, you can think of the government as essentially a corporation in the limit. The government is simply the biggest corporation with a monopoly on violence and where you have no recourse. So how much money do you want to give that entity? There is a tendency to see billionaire wealth as equivalent to a massive bank balance, whereas in reality much of that wealth does not exist as ready cash, but as the values of stock and capital. In Musk's vision, his wealth is an opportunity to make efficient and targeted capital allocations that governments either wouldn't make in the first place or which they wouldn't do efficiently, with all the cost overruns and wastage characteristic of so many public projects. By the published accounts and listening to some of Musk's interviews, his time at X.com and PayPal seems to have been a tense period, particularly in the fraught aftermath of the merger between the two companies. Many media analysts turned on Musk in their scrutiny of the affair, questioning his leadership style, the practicality of his ambitions, and to some extent his character. In some ways, the attacks set a trend. To this day, the media, social and conventional, and many corners of the internet are replete with invective against Musk. Although Musk's willingness to retaliate against accusations reins in some of the extremes. Such attacks, however, can distract us from the sheer levels of achievement that Musk has attained in his endeavors, results that could only accrue through exceptional application of intelligence and effort to a self-identified problem. Although Musk, by one interpretation, ultimately lost control of the online bank that he created and ran, let's be clear about what he achieved during this time. With his own money, Elon Musk set up a financial services company that attracted hundreds of thousands of customers, became a leading player in online banking, grew through 2 major mergers, and eventually brought Musk personal wealth that was more than 150% greater than that he had accrued with the sale of Zip2. Now remind ourselves that at the time eBay bought PayPal, he was just 31 years old. It was an astonishing journey by any account. Nor must we regard this vertical ascent to success as more a matter of luck than judgment. In Appendix 2 of his biography of Musk, Vance provides a transcript of an interview with Musk in which the entrepreneur defends some of his decisions and visions at X.com and PayPal. What comes across strongly is that Musk never relinquishes his desire to transform conventional models, but also keeps a firm grip on the intrinsic logic behind the innovation. Everything is calculated fully. The phrase, "hope for the best," doesn't seem to be part of Musk's vocabulary, however risky the venture. Some of the key points he made are: he argued that the brand change from X.com to PayPal was not necessarily the wrong move, but if he had been present to talk with the board, rather than on an aircraft bound for Australia, he believes he could have persuaded them that the timing wasn't right. Although he accepts that he might have made the same decision with the information the board possessed. Switching to the Microsoft programming tools would have brought considerable efficiencies to the coding process, not least through the extensive support libraries published by Microsoft. To Vance, Musk defended and explained the financial models he drove at PayPal. Almost no one understands how PayPal actually worked or why it took off when other payment systems before and after it didn't. Vance 2015, 406. Musk detailed how both the external automated clearinghouse and internally processed transactions promoted speed and efficiency and, in the case of internal transactions, protected against fraud. He also pushed the development of the PayPal Money Market Fund, at cost, to encourage customers to keep their transactions internal to PayPal. The full interview is recommended reading for anyone wanting a deeper insight into Musk's understanding of this controversial episode in .com history. But he returns to a core belief. The objective should be, what delivers fundamental value? Vance 2015, 408. This outlook resonates with that of one of Musk's commercial peers, Jeff Bezos, whose lifelong fixation has been to put customer needs above almost any other consideration. So, whatever interpretations are applied to Musk's actions and behaviors during his first decade of entrepreneurial activity, there is no doubt that he was a driving force in the digital revolution and established his credentials as someone capable of following his instincts for innovation to their fullest limits. Elon Musk has few ceilings on his ambitions, as was perfectly demonstrated in his next venture. He was going into the space business. Before we turn to the foundation and rise of SpaceX, a tragic personal episode in Musk's personal life needs recording, not least to show that Musk's life was not purely one of challenges at work. Shortly before the eBay acquisition of PayPal, Justine and Elon had their first child together, a boy, Nevada Alexander Musk. 10 weeks later, Elon and Justine discovered him not breathing and unresponsive in his cot. Paramedics rushed him into hospital, but after 3 days the life support machines were switched off. He had died from sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS. Musk dealt with the grief in a very private fashion and has said that he is a person who doesn't see the value in grieving publicly. Vance 2015, 123. He threw himself into his work. In her article for Marie Claire, by contrast, Justine spoke of how the death of her first child sent her into a long inward spiral of depression. The couple would go on to have more children, Justine stating that she went to an IVF clinic within 2 months of the loss of Nevada. In total, the Musks would have 5 more children together. Twins, Xavier and Griffin, were born in April 2004, followed by triplets, Kai, Saxon, and Damien in 2006. The marriage, however, was not to last. Elon filed for divorce in 2008, precipitating a long and complex settlement between the couple, in which the public naturally took great interest. Chapter 3. SpaceX. Right now, some 160 to 2,000 kilometers, 100 to 1,240 miles, above our heads, there are more than 6,500 satellites orbiting Earth. The number needs some context. Only about half of them are active, the rest being defunct space junk destined either to circle Earth silently in near perpetuity or eventually burn up with furnace fury as they slide back into the friction of Earth's atmosphere. So, there are some 3,000 to 4,000 live satellites out there, facilitating all manner of tasks from enabling our phone conversations to predicting our weather. But a major proportion of these satellites, and one that is growing on an almost monthly basis, are courtesy of Elon Musk and the company he founded in 2002, SpaceX. The Starlink satellite internet access satellites SpaceX has deployed into Earth orbit, according to data accessed in April 2022, number no fewer than 2,335, with 2,110 of those still in orbit. The evidence of Elon Musk's engineering adventurism is now wrapped around our entire planet, and it's not stopping there. More Starlink satellites join the constellation seemingly every few weeks. On 9 March 2022, to pluck a date at random, a Falcon 9 rocket, also built by SpaceX, took 48 satellites into space. They are launched in batches rather than individually. Just 10 days later, on 19 March, the 41st batch of satellites, 53 in total, was added to the constellation. The ultimate ambition, according to various press sources, is for there to be 12,000 Starlinks in orbit, and possibly as many as 42,000 in the future, giving every corner of the globe direct internet access from above the atmosphere. Already at the time of writing, 28 countries are connected to the Starlink system. As impressive as it is, Starlink is but one element within Musk's SpaceX program. Over the last 2 decades, Musk has transfigured the nature of the space industry and the expectations of what it can deliver for the future of humanity. SpaceX had developed the Falcon 1, 9, and Falcon Heavy launch vehicles for taking people and payloads to space. It has produced 4 families of working space rocket engines. It has produced the Dragon 2 class of partially reusable space vehicles for both human crew and cargo. It is even designing and developing a fully reusable super heavy lift spacecraft called Starship, which may well become the instrument of the colonization of Mars. Wikipedia's listings of SpaceX achievements, 17 April 2022, are a stack of firsts and include the first privately funded liquid propellant rocket to reach orbit around Earth, the first private company to successfully launch, orbit, and recover a spacecraft, the first private company to send a spacecraft to the International Space Station, the first vertical takeoff and vertical propulsive landing for an orbital rocket, the first reuse of an orbital rocket, and the first private company to send astronauts to orbit and to the International Space Station. SpaceX has flown the Falcon 9 series of rockets over 100 times. Note the repetition of the word private here. SpaceX's history and program seem more akin to the achievements of a national government-funded space program, not that of an aspirational private engineer and entrepreneur with no professional history in astronautics whatsoever, and who had spent the previous decade creating internet companies. Certainly, Musk was wealthy. But what will be clear from the following history is that Musk's foray into space was no mere idle indulgence, the plaything of someone with too much time and money on their hands. Instead, it is a rigorously conceived, planned, investigated, and executed program that reveals, perhaps better than any of Musk's other projects, his extraordinary capacity for treating even the greatest of challenges as opportunities susceptible to logic and process. On top of that, there was the added thrill of changing the model of an entire industry and the possibility of building multiplanetary life. Why space? We must begin with the question asked of Musk by several interviewers, why space? The question is not just curious speculation. As rich as Musk was at the beginning of the new millennium, his millions could be small change when put in context of the costs associated with spaceflight and exploration. For example, a single NASA space shuttle launch was, by 2012, running at a cost of $1.64 billion. Launching an individual satellite can, depending on the size of the payload and vehicle launching it, cost anywhere between $10 million and $400 million, and this is not counting the cost of the satellite itself. A typical weather satellite costs in the region of $290 million. So, if there is any commercial sector that can burn through hard-earned millions of dollars at ease, it is the space industry. Musk would have been well aware of the story of Beale Aerospace, founded in February 1997 by Andrew Beale, president of Beale Bank in Dallas, Texas, to develop a new heavy launch vehicle, but which ceased operations in 2000, having spent millions of dollars on development and testing. So again, why space? We start with conversation between Francis Anderton and Musk on 18 March 2013 at Tesla Motors. The reason for SpaceX and Tesla, they are not really directly related, but I think that they try to solve problems of importance. One is, in the case of Tesla, sustainable transport. We, i.e. humanity, just weren't making enough progress with electric cars, and something needed to be done on that front. And then, on SpaceX, I just think that in order for us to have an exciting future that we can feel inspired about, having a future as a spacefaring civilization is an inspiring and exciting one. I do want to make clear that I am optimistic about the future of Earth, as well as I think we should aspire to become a multi-planet civilization. The answer Musk gives here feels like a blend of engineering pragmatism and sci-fi futurism. The phrase, "something needed to be done," could well serve as a mantra in Musk's life. If he sees an important human, engineering, or commercial process being performed with less than optimal efficiency, he seems driven to fix it. His vision of the spacefaring civilization is more emotive, but rather underexplained, as if it is axiomatic that we should recognize the value of what he describes, just from its inherent worthiness. Flesh is put on the bones of this vision in other speeches. When asked by one interviewer, "Why do we need to build a city on Mars with 1 million people on it?" Musk answered with a heightened degree of passion, reaching towards something that could possibly be a core philosophy. It is important to have a future that is inspiring. There have to be reasons why you get up in the morning and you want to live. Why do you want to live? What's the point? What inspires you? What do you love about the future? And if we are not out there, if the future does not include being out there among the stars and being a multi-planet species, I find that it's incredibly depressing if that's not the future that we are going to have. Musk appears almost incredulous that anyone could not share the instinctual drive to explore everything that can be explored and to investigate the very limits of innovation. Indeed, he followed this reflection with an assessment of the key landmarks in the history of modern space exploration, before connecting this history with something of a clarion call to embrace technology and those who would pursue it. You are mistaken when they think that technology just automatically improves. It does not automatically improve. It only improves if a lot of people work very hard to make it better, and actually it will by itself degrade. Musk advocates passionate engineering as a way to counteract technological entropy and to keep civilization making the best of all the possibilities for survival and growth, rather than just assume that they will come on their own. Underpinning his technological futurism, furthermore, Musk also has a very clear logical sense of the challenges facing humanity. In other speeches, he explains the essential fragility of humanity, prey to phenomena such as extinction events and demographic implosions. Musk spells out the possible ends for humanity without alarmism or mythologizing, simply as rational possibilities and even certainties based on mathematical and statistical logic. Essentially, we need to go into space because the risks of not doing so and putting all our eggs into one Earth-shaped basket are too great. There was another compelling reason for Musk to go into space. Quite simply, it was time for a new project, and space seemed to have a unique gravity for Musk. Friends and colleagues noticed him talking and reading about the topic intensively, mentally downloading facts, principles, technologies, and data about astronautics and the industry he was about to enter. Furthermore, there was definitely opportunity here. Until the 1980s, spaceflight in the USA was still largely a government monopoly, but the Commercial Space Launch Act of 1984 added the following to NASA's mission statement. C. Commercial use of space. Congress declares that the general welfare of the United States requires that the administration seek and encourage, to the maximum extent possible, the fullest commercial use of space. It was the beginning of progressive deregulation of space in the USA during the 1980s, 1990s, and early 2000s, such as the Launch Services Purchase Act, 1990, and the Commercial Space Act, 1998, which together encouraged the entry of commercial services into space programs and broke the monopoly of the space shuttle in taking payloads into space. With the Commercial Space Launch Amendments Act of 2004, by which time Musk had already founded SpaceX, private spaceflight was given the regulatory green light. As with Zip2 and PayPal, Musk saw that the historical moment was providing an opportunity to seize. Space Startup. Elon Musk's initial vision for space exploration was off the charts ambitious. He was particularly fixated on the idea of Mars colonization, although recognized that many investigative and exploratory steps needed to be taken before human footprints were imprinted in the red Martian soil. He began attending meetings of the Mars Society, a non-profit group of scientists, aerospace engineers, and the occasional celebrity enthusiast. The film director James Cameron was a member, together dedicated to discussing all matters Mars. Within the society, Musk found a home for his ideas, while the society itself received a wealthy supporter prepared to donate money to projects. Soon, Musk was on the society's board of directors. But as his own ideas sharpened and his contact list grew, Musk needed to move ideas beyond the thought bubble. He therefore resigned from the Mars Society and set up the Life to Mars Foundation, essentially a think tank and project group packed with high-end experts, aiming to define and take the first tiny steps on the empty black road to Mars. Reporting on the Foundation's activities in September 2001, the website spaceref.com celebrated the move and outlined some of its programs. "Someone is putting his money where my mouth has been," describing permanent settlement of Mars as a positive, constructive, inspirational goal capable of uniting humanity at a critical time. .com entrepreneur Elon Musk has pledged a substantial portion of his personal fortune to realizing that goal, beginning with a proposed $20 million technology demonstration Mars lander to be launched perhaps in 2005. More specifically, Musk's ideas for Mars exploration consolidated into two main strands within the group, both of which could be regarded as adventurous or kooky, depending on your outlook. First, as a feasibility study, he wanted to send mice to Mars and bring them back again. Second came the idea for a Mars oasis, in which a robotic greenhouse would be deployed to the Martian landscape. The greenhouse would be used to grow plants, not only testing the possibilities of establishing a basic agriculture for future human inhabitants, but also generating oxygen within the Martian atmosphere. Ideas were one thing. Reality was another entirely. The scientists and aerospace engineers were concerned about the limitations of Elon's $20 to $30 million budget, which from their experience could be gobbled up quickly in hefty, voracious bites by even quite a humble space program. For Musk, therefore, an immediate priority was to acquire budget rocketry, and for that he looked to Russia. Specifically, he intended to buy Russian intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, seeking an off-the-shelf affordability and repurpose them for spaceflight. In the autumn of 2001, Musk traveled to Russia on a buying mission, accompanied by veteran space engineer Jim Cantrell and Musk's former university friend Adeo Ressi, who by now was a successful multimillionaire entrepreneur in his own right. By all accounts, the trips were awkward and frustrating affairs for Musk, the Russian representatives failing to take Musk's proposals seriously and seeing the meetings more as adjuncts to vodka shots. The team went to Russia again in February 2002, this time taking with them Mike Griffin, who had previously worked for In-Q-Tel, a venture capital arm of the CIA, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, and aerospace company Orbital Sciences. The negotiations were similarly rough and ready affairs, but the Russian dealers fell short of the right price for Musk. They offered the missiles for $8 million each. Musk wanted $2 for that price. Eventually, the U.S. teams found themselves on the return flight to the USA, their shopping basket empty. An impressive moment in the history of Musk's journey to space now occurred. A dispirited team sat on the return flight, turning over their own thoughts while many also reached for the glasses of alcohol. Not Musk. He sat on his own, hunched over his laptop and typing fast and hard into a spreadsheet. This activity went on for some time until eventually Musk turned back to the group and announced that he had found a solution to the problem of sourcing and affording the rockets. "I think we can build this rocket ourselves," Vance 2015-107. It was an extraordinary claim, and one that many in the group initially regarded as fantastical, an optimal way for Musk to scythe through his substantial financial resources. Once Musk had passed around his laptop, however, the reticence turned to interest. In the spreadsheet, Musk had modeled in detail, and with accuracy and a clearly considerable knowledge, the costs and materials involved in his space company manufacturing its own power plants, and even included some calculations of performance characteristics. He had also revised his vision. His ambitions to reach Mars would be parked, albeit temporarily. Instead, he would specifically focus on the development of launch systems capable of handling the new, smaller generations of satellites and payloads that seemed to define the future of space commerce, rather than the top end of heavy launch that had traditionally been handled by NASA and the major international space agencies. In the process, he wanted to make spaceflight cheaper and more efficient. He desired to become what he later described to employees as the Southwest Airlines of space, servicing clients such as the Department of Defense, NASA, and big communications companies for a fraction of the cost they were currently, and possibly complacently, paying. The astonishing feat for those present was that a self-taught enthusiast was proving a lofty elevator pitch with practical data and method. If anyone was going to argue with Musk, they would have to argue with hard facts and developed specifications, not with generalities. Space Exploration Technologies Corp., known better by its SpaceX abbreviation, was founded on 14 March 2002. Musk began building up a small but steadily growing team around him. One of the central figures of this team was Tom Mueller, a lifelong and brilliant rocket engineer and rocket engine designer, who had previously worked for 15 years at aerospace conglomerate TRW Inc. As one of the founding employees of SpaceX, Mueller shouldered the responsibility for developing the liquid fuel rocket engines for several series of SpaceX launch vehicles, as well as altitude control thrusters for the Dragon spacecraft. The others who steadily came on board perfectly fitted the Musk mold. They were hard-working, often young, with a demonstrably innovative spirit, and typically fired up about working on something new and cutting-edge, liberated from the traditions and inertia of many of the corporate environments they had come from. Musk personally oversaw the recruitment. Many bewildered engineers had phone calls or personal visits from Musk, the former sometimes thinking that they were being pranked, given the likelihood of an out-of-the-blue call from a multimillionaire wanting to go to space. Over the next months and years, they would need all their energy and ideas to keep up with their hyper-demanding boss. 60, 80, 100-hour weeks would not be uncommon. But the accounts of members of this early team evoke a sense of missionary zeal and esprit de corps as they found themselves participating in an electrifying mission and given freedom to explore the full capacity of their engineering talents. The early days of SpaceX had a distinctly improvisational feel to them. The company set up in a large industrial unit in El Segundo, Los Angeles, the space quickly filling up with desks, computers, workshops, and engineering equipment. Teams of engineers would also head out to remote test facilities to conduct various engine trials. Eventually, SpaceX bought its own 121-hectare, 300-acre, rocket development and test facility in McGregor, Texas, the site having previously been used by Beale Aerospace, who conveniently had left several big-ticket pieces of engine testing infrastructure. The SpaceX engineers found themselves oscillating frequently between California and Texas. Sometimes Musk even gave them use of his private plane to cut down on the travel time. The initial program laid down for SpaceX was fantastically tight and ambitious by space industry standards. The core objective was to develop the Falcon 1 rocket. The name was a fond reference to the Star Wars spaceship the Millennium Falcon, a small lift-launch vehicle capable of raising a 635-kilogram, 1,400-pound payload for a $6.9 million cost, a fraction of the typical price of a payload launch in the existing market. By way of comparison, between 1970 and 2000, the average cost to launch a kilogram of payload into space was $18,500. Based on the Falcon 1 model, a kilogram of payload could be lifted for just $4,928. The timeline set by Musk was hair-whitening. Early presentational materials committed to launching Falcon 1 just 15 months after the company was founded, and this timeline included designing and building the engines, constructing the rocket body, and developing a launch pad facility, plus gaining all the relevant regulatory paperwork and permissions. Musk was physically committed in his approach to SpaceX. Designated chief engineer, he was fully present in the workshop spaces and test areas, observing, analyzing, asking questions. He would also do hands-on work, getting fine clothes filthy alongside the engineers to get a job done. From first-person accounts, we build up a picture of a boss who exercised both patience and impatience in equal measure. He often accepted inevitable setbacks with composure, allowing the team to learn and move on without dwelling in defeatism for long. But he maintained a heavy pressure to hit goals and would not tolerate woolly thinking. Vance recounts the experience of former Boeing aerospace engineer Jeremy Hallman informing Musk about another engine test failure. Elon asked when the component could be operational again, but Hallman did not have an immediate answer. Musk pounced on this hesitancy, telling him, "You need to. This is important to the company. Everything is riding on this. Why don't you have an answer?" Hallman remembered that from this point on, he always focused on ensuring he had information at the ready. Vance, 2015, 132. Given the pressures that Musk himself was under at this time, however, note that by February 2004 he was also the chairman and largest shareholder of the Tesla company, Musk appointed a formidable assistant, Mary Beth Brown, who acted as a gatekeeper between him and those who wanted to take a slice of his time and energy. Brown became integral to the way Musk ran his affairs at SpaceX. The most consuming aspect of SpaceX's work in its first months and years was development of the Merlin and Kestrel engine types for Falcon 1. Spacecraft lift engines have to deliver enormous but stable thrust over extended durations, and the sheer violence of their physics makes them apt to blow up with terrifying unpredictability during development phases. SpaceX's experience was no different, and the testing cycle was frequently an exercise in frustration and trips back to the drawing board. Nor was Falcon 1 the only project in development. Quickly, SpaceX began work on the Falcon 5 launch vehicle, which had an intermediate lift capability, although by 2005 this had been dropped in favor of the Falcon 9 reusable medium lift vehicle, which would be capable of taking up to 22,800 kilograms, 50,265 pounds, to orbit, powered by 9 Merlin engines in its first stage. Like Falcon 1, it was a 2-stage rocket. The 3-stage Falcon 9 heavy launch vehicle intended to haul up to 2 tons to low Earth orbit was also in concept stage by 2005, although the actual intention to develop this was not unveiled to the public until 2011. SpaceX was tackling the heavily layered demands of a startup space program, but with a constant eye to breaking traditions, working from the first principles thinking that is characteristic of Musk's approach to problem-solving. See Chapter 6. The company was employing the principle of vertical integration, keeping as many of the production, development, and engineering processes contained within the company infrastructure, rather than fielding them out to external contractors. The heavy outsourcing of development to contractors was a major cause of cost overruns in traditional space development programs. The engineers were encouraged to use as many off-the-shelf components as they could to reduce costs and speed up progress. For example, in the later production of the Dragon spacecraft and the Falcon 9 lift vehicle, the SpaceX engineers built their own avionics platforms from scratch for a price tag of $10,000. Traditionally, a space avionics system might cost about $10 million to produce. When SpaceX did use contractors, Musk would keep a gimlet eye on their efforts, sometimes making long flights for unannounced visits at unsociable hours and expressing anger if he didn't find the contractors working flat out to hit the deadlines. Hard times. By December 2006, by which time an estimated development spend of $90 to $100 million had been incurred, Falcon 1 was finally ready for launch. A previous launch intended for 19 December 2005 had to be abandoned because of structural damage caused by a faulty engine valve. The pressure was on in so many ways. Not only was the vehicle running well behind the originally pitched schedule, on account of a broad array of technical and practical obstacles, but the rocket also had customers in waiting. The first 2 Falcon 1 launches had been paid for by the U.S. Air Force and the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, as an evaluation program for new launch vehicles. SpaceX had also been given a $15 million contract for the development of TACSAT-1, an experimental satellite built by the U.S. Naval Research Laboratory, NRL. TACSAT-1 was meant to be taken into orbit aboard Falcon 1's 6th launch, but delays in the Falcon 1 program and the successful launch of the successor, TACSAT-2, on an Orbital Sciences Minotaur 1 on 16 December 2006 meant that the contract was cancelled. A SpaceX June 2005 through September 2005 update to the press listed its customer manifest for future Falcon 1 and Falcon 9 launches, and they included the U.S. Department of Defense, the U.S. government, Malaysia's Astronautic Technology Sindarin Berhad, ATSB, Bigelow Aerospace, MDA Corp., the Swedish Space Corp., and the U.S. Air Force. The same press release also hammered home the news about the value on offer for commercial customers. We have also changed our pricing policy to reflect the all-inclusive price of launch to make things really clear. Some people were under the impression that range and third-party insurance costs were millions of dollars. Everything is now included, unless you have a really complex spacecraft or require an outside mission assurance process, and it's the same price we've had since 2002. $5.9 million for the vehicle plus $0.8 million for the launch range, third-party insurance, and payload integration. With much riding on a successful launch, Falcon 1 roared into life for its first mission on 23 March 2006 at 22:30 from a launch site on Amalek Island, part of the Kwajalein Atoll in the Marshall Islands. 33 seconds into the flight, there was a catastrophic engine failure with the loss of the vehicle. It was a body blow for the team after so much intensive activity and mental expectation, but they immediately made investigations to identify and remedy the problem. A second flight was scheduled for January 2007, but technical problems caused the launch to be postponed on multiple occasions before the Falcon 1 again lifted off on 21 March 2007 at 0110 GMT, carrying a DemoSat payload, a boilerplate satellite used for testing, for DARPA and NASA. This time, the rocket reached an altitude of 289 kilometers, 180 miles, but then suffered flight stability issues and the shutdown of its second-stage engine, and failed to reach the velocity required to enter orbit. Although SpaceX publicly celebrated the fact that the flight had proven 95% of the rocket's systems, it still fell short of the intended success. The third Falcon 1 mission attempt came on 3 August 2008. Again, it was a disappointment. The rocket failed to reach orbit, following a collision between the first and second stages of the rocket on their separation. The first 3 failed missions of Falcon 1 were grievous blows to the SpaceX staff. Morale was hitting rock bottom. Musk, a man of singular resistance to stress, was apparently emotionally assaulted by the trials of getting into space. He was reportedly waking from nightmares, screaming, and in physical pain. Berger, 2021, 216. To Vance, he confessed to being super depressed at this time. But Musk's problems at SpaceX were part of a far wider series of mental assaults. By the summer of 2008, the world was deep within the most devastating global financial crisis since the Great Depression. Banks and mortgage brokers were collapsing, investment portfolios plunged in value, millions lost their jobs. In the midst of this turmoil, Musk was not only running SpaceX, which had by now burned through $100 million of his own money, but his other major business, Tesla, was also on its knees. See Chapter 4. Soon, Musk would be fighting for financial survival. On top of the corporate and technological problems, 2008 was also proving to be a harsh one personally for Musk. He now had something of a global celebrity status alongside his reputation as a businessman, as he rubbed shoulders with the well-publicized rich and the famous, all under the strobing flash guns and rolling cameras of the world's media. It was the year in which he was getting divorced, with all the attention and scrutiny that came with it. He had started a new relationship with the English actress Tallulah Riley, which did little to dim the public attention. The couple would be married in Scotland in 2010. The world's business press was also giving Musk a hard time, some delighting over his struggles and questioning his credentials for further success. Musk had much to prove, therefore, but he also had to survive psychologically. In an interview with Scott Pelley for CBS News' 60 Minutes program on 30 March 2014, he confessed that 2008 was definitely the worst year of my life. He added, "I remember waking up the Sunday before Christmas in 2008 and thinking to myself, man, I never thought I was someone who could ever be capable of a nervous breakdown. I felt this is the closest I've ever come because it seemed pretty dark." A moment of much-awaited light came on 28 September 2008 when Falcon 1 achieved its first successful launch and mission, carrying a 165-kilogram, 363-pound dummy payload into orbit as planned. For a moment, Musk and his team rightly basked in the success, and we should not let our present familiarity with spaceflight obscure what Musk and the SpaceX team had accomplished. At this point in history, only massive state-funded space programs in the USA, Russia, and China had succeeded in launching, orbiting, and recovering a spacecraft. Now, a private company, run by a man without an aerospace pedigree and funding the majority of the project himself, had accomplished the same. Musk had also been centrally involved in the engineering development of the program. In fact, he subsequently expressed the view in an interview with blunt honesty that he had a part to play in the mission failures as well as the successes. And the reason that I ended up being the chief engineer or chief designer was not because I want to, it's because I couldn't hire anyone. Nobody good would join, so I ended up being that by default, and I messed up the first 3 launches. The first 3 launches failed. Fortunately, the 4th launch, that was the last money that we had for Falcon 1, the 4th launch worked, or that would have been it for SpaceX. The 4th launch of Falcon 1 brought tears of jubilation from both Musk and his exceptional team. But the financial problems remained. Indeed, if anything, they intensified. Both Tesla and SpaceX were literally running out of cash. Now, Musk was faced with one of the hardest decisions of his business career. He explained the quandary in an interview for South by Southwest in March 2018. 2008 was brutal. In 2008, we had the 3rd consecutive failure of the Falcon 1 rocket from SpaceX. Tesla almost went bankrupt. We closed our financing round at 6 p.m. on Christmas Eve 2008. It was the last hour of the last day that it was possible. We would have gone bankrupt 2 days after Christmas otherwise, and I got divorced. It was rough. SpaceX is alive by the skin of its teeth. So is Tesla. If things had gone just a little bit the other way, both companies would have been dead. One of the most difficult choices I ever faced was in 2008. I had around $30 to $40 million left in 2008. I had 2 choices. I could put it all into one company, and then the other company would definitely die, or split it between the 2 companies. But if I split it between the 2 companies, both might die. When you put your blood, sweat, and tears into creating something and building something, it's like a child. So, which one? Am I going to let one starve to death? I couldn't bring myself to do it, so I split my money between the 2. Having made his decision, Musk now had to fight for his financial life, scrambling to inject and raise money from whatever sources he could. See the following chapter for further details. Tesla, as indicated, was saved at the last minute, literally hours before the company was to have run out of money. SpaceX also received a last-minute reprieve when, on 23 December 2008, the company was granted NASA's Commercial Resupply Services (CRS) contract, which awarded $1.6 billion to SpaceX to perform 12 cargo transport missions to the International Space Station (ISS) over the period between contract signature and 2016. Although SpaceX would have to battle financially for many years to come, it had been saved. Furthermore, it had secured exactly the type of major government contract that would act as a proving ground for its capabilities and a stepping stone to yet more commercial work. Musk had proven much in the face of his detractors, demonstrating the tenacity and the commercial intelligence to pull 2 major companies back from the very edge of failure amidst a devastating economic recession. The triumph of SpaceX. If we fast forward the newsreel from the end of 2008 to the present day, the change in SpaceX's fortunes could not be greater. In 2018, a decade after the company teetered on the brink, it took an estimated $2 billion in launch revenue, a quarter of the entire global space industry revenue, and was valued at $52 billion. By October 2021, its value had truly reached escape velocity at $100 billion, worth more than aerospace industry leviathan Lockheed Martin. It is today one of the world's largest, most active, and most influential space companies. Notably, it remains a private company. Musk has resolutely refused to take the company public, preferring not to cede control of the direction and investments of the company to shareholders. Recounting SpaceX's technical and commercial progress from 2008 to the present in detail would take a book in itself. Volumes that do so are given in the bibliography. but an overview of some key landmarks is useful to orient ourselves to the incredible journey Musk has overseen. Falcon 1, the rocket on which SpaceX was born, made a fifth and final and successful launch in July 2009, after which the company's concentration switched to developing Falcon 9, the vehicle that would fulfill NASA's CRS contract. NASA also signed agreements with SpaceX within the Commercial Orbital Transportation Services (COTS) program, which focused on supporting the development by private companies of vehicles capable of delivering crew and cargo to the ISS. This would be fulfilled by SpaceX's Dragon, aka Dragon 1 and Cargo Dragon, a partially reusable cargo spacecraft that can transport a 6,000-kilogram, 13,300-pound payload to the ISS or similar future destination, and come back to Earth with 3,000 kilograms, 6,600 pounds of return payload. Dragon had its first successful orbital mission in December 2010 aboard a Falcon 9, and on 22 May 2012 it launched again, this time at the beginning of a 9-day mission to the ISS, with all objectives completed. It was not only the first time a U.S. space vehicle had visited the ISS since the end of the shuttle program, it was also the first time a commercial spacecraft had rendezvoused with another spacecraft. Over time, Dragon's capabilities would be extended by Dragon 2, which had two variants: Crew Dragon, capable, according to SpaceX publicity, of taking 7 human passengers to and from Earth orbit and beyond, and Cargo Dragon, an improved version of the Dragon 1. Another Dragon milestone was the launch on 30 May 2020 of Cargo Dragon Demo 2, which took 2 NASA astronauts, Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken, into orbit and to the ISS, in what was another first. The first crewed orbital spaceflight launched from the USA since the final Space Shuttle mission in 2011. Dragon has remained active to this day. As of 9 April 2022, Dragon spacecraft have made 33 total launches and 29 visits to the ISS. The year 2014 was a significant one for SpaceX commercially and technologically. During that year, SpaceX won 9 of the 20 commercial launch contracts open to international competitive bidding. Taking that slice of the pie was a radical shakeup for the global industry. The major French company Arianespace, founded in 1980 and the world's first commercial launch service provider, also won 9, but given the company's long ancestry and established position, the fact that it did not win more contracts than SpaceX was an upset in itself. A heavier impact was felt by the U.S. company United Launch Alliance, ULA, founded in 2006 as a joint venture between Lockheed Martin Space and Boeing Defense, Space and Security, despite the fact that the new company amounted to an effective monopoly over U.S. launch services, something SpaceX challenged legally in 2005 during the formation of ULA. Yet in 2014, ULA won only one contract for Orbital Science's Cygnus space station supply freighter. SpaceX effectively broke the ULA hold over U.S. launches, and the commercial battle between the two continues to this day, with SpaceX in the ascendant. Also in 2014, SpaceX was awarded NASA's Commercial Crew Transportation Capability (CCTCAP) contract to finalize the capability for human transportation to the ISS. SpaceX has continued to stay at the cutting edge of launch capability with improvements to existing launch vehicles and the development of new ones. A key operational focus for Musk has been reusability in space launch vehicles to achieve cost efficiencies. Historically, most of the components of rocket launch vehicles, such as main vehicle thrust structures and propellant tanks, have been expendable, one-shot items only. With its Falcon 9 vehicle, SpaceX achieved a partial reusability, the first stage of the rocket returning to Earth and making a visually futuristic controlled vertical landing either at a land-based site or on an autonomous spaceport drone ship, ASDS barge, essentially a flat-decked ocean-going robotic vessel providing a safe and stable offshore landing site for the returning rockets. The ASDS in itself is something of a revolution in technology and spaceflight. Musk's naming of the ships, "Just read the instructions" to "A shortfall of gravitas" and "Of course I still love you," speaks much of his fondness for science fiction, being the same as or similar to spaceships that appear in the Culture series of science fiction novels by Ian M. Banks. On 21 December 2021, SpaceX tweeted that Falcon 9's first stage has landed on the Just Read the Instructions drone ship, marking the 100th successful landing of an orbital-class rocket booster. Reusability was now an established functional reality of the SpaceX program. To ensure that it had full-spectrum payload capabilities, SpaceX also developed the Falcon Heavy. The SpaceX website captures the capability and market separation of this enormous power plant. Falcon Heavy is the most powerful operational rocket in the world by a factor of 2. With the ability to lift into orbit nearly 64 metric tons, 141,000 pounds, Falcon Heavy can lift more than twice the payload of the next closest operational vehicle, the Delta IV Heavy. Falcon Heavy is composed of 3 Falcon 9 engine cores whose 27 Merlin engines together generate more than 5 million pounds of thrust at liftoff, equal to approximately 18 747 aircraft. Once again, SpaceX was taking a lead in the space game. The Falcon Heavy's maiden flight also had a truly unusual signature, one that speaks volumes about Musk's maverick challenge to traditionalism while also evidencing a strong sense of humor. On 31 March 2017, a Twitter user, Cardoso, asked Musk what the test payload would be for the first launch of the Falcon Heavy. Musk cryptically replied, "Silliest thing we can imagine. Secret payload of first Dragon flight was a giant wheel of cheese, inspired by a friend and Monty Python." Then, on 2 December, Musk finally confirmed the payload in another tweet. It was unexpected, to say the least. "Payload will be my midnight cherry Tesla Roadster playing Space Oddity. Destination is Mars orbit. We'll be in deep space for 1 billion years or so if it doesn't blow up on ascent." Falcon Heavy and marketing magic. And so it was on 6 February 2018, the Falcon Heavy lifted off from Kennedy Space Center Launch Complex 39A with Musk's Tesla Roadster mounted on the payload adapter, the second stage of the rocket eventually placing the Roadster in a heliocentric orbit. Compounding the absurdity of the scene, a dummy astronaut clad in a SpaceX spacesuit sat with some nonchalance in the driver's seat, the left elbow resting on the windowsill as if the astronaut were out for a casual interstellar Sunday drive. Appropriately, he is called Starman, the nod to David Bowie's music reinforced by Space Oddity and Life on Mars playing on loop from the sound system. The glove box contains a copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, also referenced by a sign on the dashboard reading, "Don't panic." If anything says, "I can do what I want," surely the Roadster in space is the ultimate expression. Cameras aboard the spacecraft transmitted extraordinary pictures, stills, and video showing a Tesla Roadster apparently driven by a spaceman breezing along with the planet Earth as a backdrop. Some might see this as trivializing spaceflight. Indeed, firing what essentially amounted to nothing more than automotive junk into space did attract criticism from some scientific and academic quarters. But it was something of a masterpiece of publicity, one that triggered mostly laudatory reflection from the world's marketing media. The title of one piece of analysis, "There's advertising and marketing, and then there's Elon Musk." Mark Winnick, Ad Age, 8 February 2018, captured the slightly stunned awe of advertisers around the world, humbled before a man who managed to promote 2 companies at once in space, the images of the Roadster achieving media virality with effortless global reach. We will reflect more on Musk as a marketer in the following chapter, but Musk countered his critics with a youthful and optimistic voice that rang a celebratory note. Life cannot just be about solving one sad problem after another. There need to be things that inspire you, that make you glad to wake up in the morning and be part of humanity. That is why we did it. We did it for you. Twitter, 11 March 2018. At a subsequent Q&A session at the South by Southwest Festival, SXSW, Musk deepened the message, explaining that the Tesla space car was no mere stunt but a tool to encourage humanity to lift its head high once again. We really wanted to get the public here to wonder, to get excited about the possibility of something new happening in space, of the space frontier getting pushed forward. The goal of this was to inspire you and make you believe again, just as people believed in the Apollo era, that anything is possible. Starlink and the commercial rise of SpaceX. In January 2015, SpaceX announced the launch of its Starlink satellite internet constellation program at the opening of its new development facility in Redmond, Washington. The vision for extending the internet into space appears to have been brewing in Musk's mind since the early 2000s, but according to a Wall Street Journal article on November 2014, Musk and tech entrepreneur Gray Weiler were then in discussions about building a constellation of communication satellites called Worldview, although these did not go further. Starlink, by contrast, was a visionary ambition to provide global demand for internet broadband capabilities, particularly in those areas of the planet with limited connectivity. While Musk's engineering teams went into action to develop both the satellites and affordable end-user equipment, SpaceX also had to negotiate the numerous regulatory hurdles to deploy the satellites in the first place, with some challenging requirements from the Federal Communications Commission, FCC. For SpaceX's plans were high-end. By March 2017, it had filed plans with the FCC to deploy 11,943 satellites in 2 different low Earth or very low Earth orbits. And this was just the beginning. The plans were eventually to field tens of thousands of Starlink satellites. On 22 February 2018, 2 test Starlink satellites, Tintin A and Tintin B, were successfully launched and deployed. On 24 May 2019, 60 live satellites were launched, designed to test the network technology. These achieved some public prominence when filmed from Earth traveling through the night sky, a visible chain of lights in the blackness of space. On 22 October 2019, Elon Musk was able to tweet the following: "Sending this tweet through space via Starlink satellite." 60 more satellites, this time fully operational variants, went up on 11 November. From this point on, Starlink satellites have been launched with confident regularity, with 2,091 sent up between February 2018 and 2022. As with much of SpaceX's program, the actual manufacture of the satellites has been kept largely in-house, with SpaceX Vice President Jonathan Hoffeller stating at the Satellite 2020 conference in Washington, D.C., that the company was manufacturing 6 satellites per day, an astonishing figure that means a significant portion of orbital space will be dominated by SpaceX. My compact linear narrative of SpaceX's developments since its crisis in 2008 can give the impression of a smooth ascent to ultimate stability and success. In fact, Musk and SpaceX have taken a wild ride, with some major and repeated technical setbacks. Spaceflight, by its very nature, is an ultra-aggressive wrestling match between physics and technology, and SpaceX has not always come out on top. In June 2015, for example, the 7th SpaceX ISS resupply mission, CRS-7, exploded 2 minutes into flight, and in September 2016, another Falcon 9 was destroyed, this time on the ground in preparation for a static test, in the process obliterating a customer's $200 million communications satellite payload. But notwithstanding such setbacks, SpaceX has settled into the rhythms of success, and the company attained financial security through a mixture of funding secured and commercial contracts. One of the first major external investments was that made by NASA to support the COTS program, which awarded $278 million. By mid-2012, following the first SpaceX flights to the ISS, the company's private equity valuation had climbed to $2.4 billion, and in January 2015, the company raised another $1 billion in funding from Google and Fidelity for 8.33% of the stock. A further $350 million was raised in July 2017, and by the following year the company had performed more than 100 launches, with about $12 billion in contract revenue. August 2020 saw another funding round raising $1.9 billion, and another $1.61 billion in February 2021. It was patently clear investors were recognizing that much of the future of spaceflight might belong to SpaceX and its ambitious leader. By October 2021, the company was valued at $100.3 billion. Of course, the rise of the company's finances was also pushing Musk's personal wealth to ever greater altitudes. According to press data from 2019, Musk holds 54% of the company's equity, with 76% voting rights. Along with the stratospheric growth of Tesla and the strong performance of some of Musk's other investments and companies, in 2022 he was officially declared the world's richest man ever by Forbes. See Chapter 5. To the Moon and Mars, Starship. The SpaceX journey began with Elon Musk's vision for the Mars Oasis. Although there were subsequent pragmatic redirections to get his fledgling space company established and running, Musk's vision for giving humanity interplanetary options in the future has never waned, and alongside the Falcon 1, Falcon 9, and Crew Dragon programs, there were hints of even greater plans. During 11 to 13 November 2005, Musk attended Space Vision 2005, an annual conference for Students for the Exploration and Development of Space, SEDS, at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. There, he began revealing plans for far greater space rocketry than the Falcon 1 that was due to launch just weeks later. Musk also outlined plans to build more powerful engine types than the Merlin 1 type then in use on Falcons 1, 5, and 9. A perceptive audience member asked Musk about a particularly large test stand at the Texas engine facility, which SpaceX called the BFTS, noting that its scale implied it could take nearly 5 times the thrust of a Falcon 9 first stage. In response, Musk described his vision for a Merlin 2, a monster engine capable of lifting the heaviest of payloads. Multiple Merlin 2s, he told the conference, would be used to develop what he wryly called the BFR. The B stands for big, and the R stands for rocket. With this information, it is also easy to work out what BFTS stands for. Musk argued the long-term focus for Merlin 2 development, Moon and Mars exploration, although he admitted that we're not quite sure how to pay for that vehicle. But while the idea for the BFR was initially sketchy, it steadily acquired sharper lines both in Musk's mind and on the developmental drawing board. In 2007, Musk gave an interview for Wired magazine. The subsequent article by Carl Hoffman, published on 22 May, tellingly carried the title, "Elon Musk is betting his fortune on a mission beyond Earth's orbit." In the interview, Musk responded to an argument by John Pike, a space analyst at globalsecurity.org, who challenged Musk's belief that he could change the fundamental financial equation of putting payloads into low Earth orbit, about $10,000 per pound in weight. Musk responded with ebullient defiance. "But I want to make rockets 100 times, if not 1,000 times better. The ultimate objective is to make humanity a multi-planet species. 30 years from now, there'll be a base on the Moon and Mars, and people will be going back and forth on SpaceX rockets. More hints and details about just how Musk was going to tackle these challenges trickled out over subsequent years, given extra credence by the fact that SpaceX was becoming a respected aerospace company. Musk himself was by the 2010s regarded as a serious space engineer who was raising the pulse and possibilities of spaceflight, while at the same time reducing its costs. Then, in September 2016, Musk made a lengthy SpaceX presentation entitled "Making Humans a Multiplanetary Species." The title promised substantial revelations, and the audience wouldn't be disappointed. Musk opened the presentation with a simple question. So, how do we figure out how to take you to Mars and create a self-sustaining city? A city that is not merely an outpost, but it could become a planet in its own right. Thus, we could become a truly multi-planet species. Working through his set of presentation slides, he next made a scientific case for Mars as the prime objective for space colonization, comparing it to the properties of Earth in a comparative table. In the final row of the table, people, the slide gave the figure 7 billion for Earth and 0 for Mars. One senses that the Mars figure was given to show potentiality for settlement, not resignation to realities. After this, Musk moved on to the economics of Mars settlement. Given that historical spaceflight had been inordinately expensive, this was an important moment in the presentation. How could he do it without burning up entire fortunes? Musk explained that using Apollo-era technology, travel to Mars would indeed be prohibitively expensive at every level, costing about $10 billion per person. At such prices, significant population transfers from Earth to Mars were simply out of the question. Musk then shifted the conceptual framework profoundly. Instead, he argued, he wanted to reduce the per-person cost of going to Mars to about the median price of a house in the USA, about $200,000. Only then could Mars colonization become a genuine off-planet possibility, the decision to move to Mars carrying similar decision-making weight to moving home or having a major change in career. Given the sheer disparity between the $10 billion and $200,000 cost models, clearly some proof was in order. Musk was arguing for a 5 million % improvement in the cost per ton to Mars. Slide 13 of the deck therefore listed the 4 key technological developments that had to occur to achieve this goal. 1. Full reusability. 2. Refilling in orbit. 3. Propellant production on Mars. 4. Right propellant. Any accusations that Musk might have been on a flight of fancy were dispelled in the subsequent section of the presentation, in which he explained the physics, developed theory, and the technologies behind achieving each of the bullet points. The presentation eventually built up to the moment to reveal the system architecture, the actual details of how the Mars missions would be performed, and the types of craft that would make the epic multi-month journeys to the Red Planet. Simplifying somewhat here, the Mars spacecraft would launch from Earth, a huge booster rocket taking the craft into space. The booster would, after separation, return to Earth and make a controlled and autonomous landing, thereafter being reused for subsequent launches. At the beginning of its journey into space, the spaceship would rendezvous with tanker ships, performing an in-flight refueling in the vacuum of space. In an earlier stage of the presentation, Musk explained that not refilling in orbit would require a 3-stage vehicle at 5 to 10 times the size and cost, and also that spreading the required lift capability across multiple launches substantially reduces development costs and compresses schedules. The tankers then return to Earth while the Mars vehicle now begins its journey to Mars. This epic haul across space would take some 7 to 9 months, traversing about 480 million kilometers, 300 million miles. The spacecraft would eventually make a vertical landing on Mars and offload its passengers and payload. Propellant for the return journey would be manufactured on the planet, the production utilizing materials mined from Mars itself. Musk explained in the slides that bringing return propellant requires approximately 5 times as much mass departing Earth. When the time is right, the spacecraft then makes the return journey to Earth, being turned around quickly for its next flight. The overall vision for reusability is 1,000 uses per booster, 100 per tanker, and 12 per ship. The detail of Musk's Mars ambition goes to the heart of his engineering method, and not least the reasoning from first principles outlined in detail in Chapter 6. At the beginning of the presentation, Musk showed some numinous pictures of Mars and spoke in reverent tones about the possibility that one day we might just live there. At that point in the proceedings, it almost had the ring of implausible 1950s visions of intergalactic travel, more akin to Star Trek than SpaceX. Less than halfway through the presentation, however, Musk has transitioned to an eminently believable prospect, one that possibly can be timetabled into the near future. For Musk, if the logic of the core principles and technologies is sound in the smallest increments, then scaling up to a grandiose scale is equally logical. His ultimate vision does indeed stray into the realms of sci-fi, explicitly so. Over time, there would be many spaceships. We would ultimately have over 1,000 or more spaceships waiting in orbit, so the Mars colonial fleet would depart en masse, kind of like Battlestar Galactica. But it actually makes sense to load the spaceships into orbit, because you have 2 years to do so. The rendezvous orbit for going to Mars comes around every 26 months. An appreciative round of applause came from the audience when Musk finally revealed the instrument of his ambitions, at this stage in its evolution simply referred to as the Mars vehicle. The graphics showed a monster piece of kit, the combined booster and ship standing to a height of 122 meters, 400 feet, even taller than the Saturn V that performed the Apollo missions at 111 meters, 364 feet. Every statistic about the vehicle represented a leap beyond historical parameters. A 10,500-ton liftoff mass, Saturn V 3,039 tons, a 13,033-ton liftoff thrust, Saturn V 3,579 tons, an expendable low Earth orbit payload of 550 tons, Saturn V 135 tons. Clearly, the Mars vehicle was intended to be a spacecraft that represented the next stage in the evolution of space exploration. Musk reflected on its design, but also made clear that this was just the first step up the evolutionary ladder. It's quite big. The funny thing is that in the long term, ships will be even bigger than this. This will be relatively small compared to the Mars interplanetary ships of the future. But it kind of needs to be about this size because in order to fit about 100 people in the pressurized section and carry the luggage and all of the unpressurized cargo to build propellant plants and build everything from iron foundries to pizza joints, you name it, we need to carry a lot of cargo. The Mars vehicle would eventually acquire a fitting name, Starship. During the 2015 presentation, the slide deck offered a Gantt chart revealing the projected timelines of the mission to Mars. With the major technologies developed by 2019, booster and orbital testing would take place from 2019 to late 2022, and Mars flights themselves would start in the later months of 2022. In reality, these schedules have had to move somewhat. Practical Starship development began in 2019 in Florida and Texas and was accompanied by a stinging commercial decision. In January that year, SpaceX announced that it would be compelled to lay off 10% of its 6,000-strong workforce in order to make the financials work for development of Starlink and Starship combined. The company press release stated, "To continue delivering for our customers and to succeed in developing interplanetary spacecraft and a global space